When a New York mafia king gets a call at 2 a.m. that the one woman he can't afford to lose has been shot, he realizes too late. The biggest threat to his empire isn't rival syndicates or federal raids. It's love. And someone just declared war on the only thing he's ever cared about. This is a story about power, blood, and the impossible choice between staying in the shadows or stepping into the light for someone worth dying for. Hit that like button, drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels, and stay with me until the very end, because this is only the beginning. The phone rang at 2:17 a.m. Lorenzo Vieri didn't sleep much anymore. Hadn't for years. Sleep was a luxury men like him couldn't afford. Not when enemies moved in darkness and alliances shifted like sand. But when his phone lit up with an unknown number at that hour, something in his chest tightened. He answered without a word. "Mr. Vieri?" A man's voice, shaking. "This is Dr. Patel from Mercy General. There's been a shooting. Isabella Cruz, she's in critical condition. She asked for you before she—" The phone hit the floor. Lorenzo was already moving. He didn't remember grabbing his coat. Didn't remember the elevator ride down 43 floors or the way his driver's face went pale when Lorenzo shoved him aside and took the wheel himself. The city blurred past. Neon signs, empty streets, the skyline that belonged to him in ways the mayor would never admit. But none of it mattered. Because Isabella Cruz, the woman who'd saved his nephew's life 6 months ago, who smiled at dying children like they were miracles, who had no idea what kind of man Lorenzo really was bleeding out in some hospital bed, and someone was going to pay for that in ways they couldn't imagine. Mercy General's ER was chaos. Lorenzo walked through it like a storm, and people moved. They always did. Something about the way he carried himself, the tailored suit that cost more than most people's cars, the cold precision in his eyes, the weight of violence that clung to him like cologne, made crowds part instinctively. A security guard stepped in front of him. "Sir, you can't—" Lorenzo didn't break stride. One of his men, Marco, who'd been following 3 steps behind, put a hand on the guard's shoulder, whispered something. The guard went white and stepped aside. Dr. Patel was waiting near the surgical wing. Mid-40s, exhausted, coffee-stained scrubs. He straightened when he saw Lorenzo approaching. "Mr. Vieri, she's still in surgery. Gunshot wound to the abdomen, close range. She lost a lot of blood before the paramedics." "Who shot her?" Lorenzo's voice was quiet. "Dangerously so." "The police don't know yet. It happened outside the clinic where she volunteers. Someone called it in, but there were no witnesses, or at least none that stayed around." Lorenzo's jaw tightened. "I want her moved, as soon as she's stable." "Moved? Mr. Vieri, she needs intensive care. This hospital has—" "I don't care what this hospital has." Lorenzo turned to face him fully, and the doctor took an involuntary step back. "I have a facility, better equipment, better security, better doctors. You'll transfer her the moment it's safe. Understood?" Dr. Patel opened his mouth, closed it, nodded. "I need to make some calls," Lorenzo said, already turning away. "Let me know the second she's out of surgery." Adet. He found a private waiting room and shut the door. For 30 seconds, Lorenzo just stood there, breathing, trying to process the thing clawing its way up his throat, something he hadn't felt in over 20 years. Fear. Not for himself. Never for himself. He'd walked into federal courtrooms without flinching, had stared down the barrel of a .45 in a warehouse in Brooklyn, and smiled at the man holding it. Fear was something other people felt, something he used. But this was different. Isabella Cruz had no place in his world. She was a pediatric nurse who volunteered at free clinics, who wore scrubs with cartoon characters on them, who hummed while she worked and made scared kids laugh with terrible knock-knock jokes. She didn't know about the empire Lorenzo ran from the shadows, didn't know about the shipments that came through the docks, or the politicians in his pocket, or the bodies that disappeared when people forgot their debts. She thought he was just a businessman who'd brought his nephew in after a bad car accident. She'd worked 18 hours straight to save that kid's life. And when it was over, when Lorenzo tried to hand her an envelope thick with cash, she'd pushed it back with a tired smile and said, "Just make sure he wears his seatbelt next time." He'd thought about her every day since, and now someone had put a bullet in her. Lorenzo pulled out his phone and made the first call. Enzo. Dante's voice, rough with sleep. His second in command, the only man Lorenzo trusted without question. What's wrong? Isabella Cruz was shot tonight. I need you to find out everything. Who, why, where they are right now. A pause. The nurse? Jesus, she okay? She's in surgery. Lorenzo's grip on the phone tightened. I need answers, Dante, fast and quiet. Consider it done. The second call was to his lawyer. The third to the head of his private security team. The fourth to a man who owed Lorenzo a favor and happened to run the city's best medical facility for people who preferred to stay off the grid. By the time Dr. Patel knocked on the door 2 hours later, Lorenzo had already set a dozen wheels in motion. She's out of surgery, the doctor said. Critical but stable. We removed the bullet and repaired the damage, but the next 24 hours are crucial. Can she be moved? Not yet. Maybe in a few days if... Then I'm staying. Dr. Patel hesitated. Mr. Vieri, visiting hours? I'm not visiting. Lorenzo brushed past him into the hallway. Which room? She looked small in the hospital bed. That was Lorenzo's first thought when he saw her through the window of the ICU. Isabella Cruz, who always seemed larger than life despite being barely 5'4", who filled entire rooms with warmth and energy, looked fragile under the tangle of tubes and monitors. A nurse was checking her vitals. Lorenzo waited until she left, then slipped inside. The machines beeped steadily. Her face was pale, dark hair spread across the pillow. There was a bruise forming on her cheekbone that hadn't been mentioned in the report, maybe from hitting the ground when she fell. Lorenzo pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down. He didn't pray. Hadn't since he was a kid, and even then it had felt like shouting into an empty room. But he sat there in the sterile quiet and made promises to the universe anyway. If she lived, he'd find whoever did this. If she lived, he'd make sure it never happened again. If she lived... Her hand was lying on top of the blanket, IV taped to the back of it. Lorenzo reached out slowly, carefully, and wrapped his fingers around hers. Her skin was cool. He stayed like that until sunrise. Dante called at 6:47 a.m. Lorenzo stepped into the hallway, keeping the ICU door in sight. Talk to me, he said. Got the police report. 2 shooters, professional job. They were waiting for her outside the clinic. 3 shots fired. 1 missed, 1 grazed her shoulder, 1 hit center mass. She went down. They took off in a black SUV. No plates. Witnesses? None that stuck around. But I pulled security footage from a bodega across the street. Got partial faces, running them through our system now. Lorenzo's free hand curled into a fist. Why her? That's the interesting part. Dante's voice dropped. The clinic she volunteers at? It's in Markov territory. Markov. Anton Markov, head of the Russian syndicate that had been pushing into Lorenzo's operations for the past year. A man who didn't play by the old rules, who saw violence as a first resort instead of a last one. You think this was a message? Lorenzo asked. I think it's suspicious timing. Last week we shut down 3 of his smuggling routes. Week before that, his nephew got arrested on trafficking charges. Markov's been bleeding money. So he shoots a nurse? Maybe he didn't know she was connected to you. Or maybe he did, and this is him testing boundaries. Lorenzo closed his eyes. Find the shooters. I don't care what it costs. Already on it. But Enzo, if this was Markov and we hit back, it's going to get messy. It's already messy, Dante. Someone put Isabella in intensive care. There's no version of this that ends quietly. He hung up and went back into the room. Isabella hadn't moved. The monitors beeped their steady rhythm. A different nurse came in to check the IV, gave Lorenzo a curious look, but didn't ask him to leave. He sat back down and took her hand again. You're going to be okay, he said quietly. I promise. It was the first promise Lorenzo Vieri had made in years that he actually intended to keep. 3 days passed. Lorenzo barely left the hospital. He had Marco bring him changes of clothes, took phone calls in the hallway, ran his empire from a plastic chair in the ICU. The nurses stopped asking questions. The doctors learned to give him space. Isabella remained unconscious, but stable. The swelling in her brain was going down. Her vitals were improving. Dr. Patel said it was a good sign. Lorenzo didn't feel good about anything. Dante called twice a day with updates. They'd identified the shooters, two contract killers out of Brighton Beach with ties to Markov's organization. One was already dead, killed in an unrelated shootout with police. The other had gone to ground. "We're tracking him," Dante said. "He'll surface eventually. Make it eventually happen faster." On the fourth day, Lorenzo was reading through shipping manifests on his tablet when he heard it, a soft sound, barely audible over the machines. Isabella was stirring. He dropped the tablet and leaned forward. Her eyelids were fluttering. Her fingers twitched. "Isabella?" His voice came out rougher than he intended. Her eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then gradually sharpening. She blinked at the ceiling, at the monitors, at the IV in her arm. Then her gaze landed on Lorenzo. "Hey," she whispered. Her voice was hoarse, throat raw from the ventilator tube they'd removed yesterday. "Hey yourself." Lorenzo felt something loosen in his chest. "How do you feel?" "Like I got shot." A weak smile. "Did I get shot?" "Yeah, you did." She was quiet for a moment, processing. "You've been here the whole time, haven't you?" "Mostly." "Why?" It was a simple question with a complicated answer. Lorenzo settled for the truth, or at least part of it. "Because when I got the call that you were hurt, I realized something. You matter to me, Isabella. More than I expected." She studied him with those dark, intelligent eyes. Even weak and recovering, she saw too much. "You brought me flowers," she said, noticing the vase on the table. "White roses. That's sweet. Don't tell anyone, I have a reputation." That got a real smile, small but genuine. Then she winced, hand moving to her abdomen. "Don't move too much," Lorenzo said quickly. "You're healing, but it's going to hurt for a while." "Who shot me?" "Someone who made a mistake." "That's not an answer, Lorenzo." He looked at her. Really looked at her. This woman who'd somehow slipped past every defense he'd built, who made him feel things he'd buried so deep he'd forgotten they existed. She deserved the truth, but the truth was dangerous. "It's complicated," he said finally. "I'm a nurse. I understand complicated." "Not this kind." Isabella's expression shifted. Still weak, still in pain, but something sharper entering her gaze. "What kind of businessman are you, exactly?" Before Lorenzo could answer, Dr. Patel knocked and entered, relief flooding his face when he saw Isabella awake. "Ms. Cruz, this is excellent. How are you feeling?" And just like that, the moment passed. Over the next 2 days, Isabella grew stronger. They moved her out of intensive care into a private room. She could sit up now, could eat soft foods, could stay awake for more than 20 minutes at a time. The police came to take her statement. Lorenzo stayed in the room, watching carefully. Isabella told them what she remembered, leaving the clinic late, walking to her car, hearing footsteps behind her, turning, seeing a gun, then nothing. "Did you recognize the shooters?" the detective asked. "No, it was dark, and it happened so fast." "Any idea why someone would want to hurt you?" "None. I'm a nurse. I help people." The detective made notes, asked a few more questions, then left his card. "If you remember anything else, call me." After he was gone, Isabella looked at Lorenzo. "He thinks I'm lying. Are you?" "I told him everything I know." She paused. "But you know more, don't you?" Lorenzo stood and walked to the window. Outside, the city moved, cars and people and the endless churn of life that never stopped. Not even for violence, not even for death. "Yes," he said without turning around. "Are you going to tell me?" "Not yet." "Why not?" "Because once I do, everything changes, and I'm not ready for that yet." He heard her shift in the bed behind him. "Lorenzo, someone tried to kill me. I think I have a right to know why." She was right. Of course she was right. But telling her meant pulling her deeper into his world, and that world had a way of destroying good things. "Soon," he said. "I promise. But first, I need to make sure you're safe." "I'm in a hospital. Hospitals can't stop the kind of people who did this." That hung in the air between them. Finally, Isabella spoke again, quieter now. "Are you in danger too?" Lorenzo turned to look at her. She was sitting up in bed, hospital gown slipping off one shoulder, hair tangled, bruises fading from yellow-green to brown. She looked exhausted and worried and way too concerned about him. "I'm always in danger," he said, but I can handle myself. That's not reassuring. It's the truth. She held his gaze for a long moment. I don't know who you really are, do I? No. But you're not just a businessman. No. Are you a good person? That one hit harder than it should have. Lorenzo thought about all the things he'd done, all the choices he'd made, all the lines he'd crossed in the name of power and survival and control. I don't think good people exist, he said finally. Just people who make different kinds of mistakes. Isabella considered that. I think you're wrong, but I also think you believe what you just said, which is sad. Why sad? Because it means you've forgotten how to hope for better. Before Lorenzo could respond, his phone buzzed. A text from Dante. Found him. Moving in 20 minutes. Lorenzo's expression must have changed because Isabella noticed immediately. What is it? I have to go. He moved toward the door, then stopped. I'm leaving Marco outside. If you need anything... Lorenzo. Her voice stopped him. Be careful. He looked back at her. Always am. It was a lie, and they both knew it. The second shooter's name was Yuri Volkov. He'd holed up in a safe house in Queens, a rundown apartment building where half the tenants were running from something and the other half didn't ask questions. Lorenzo met Dante and 4 of his best men 3 blocks away. He's on the 3rd floor, Dante said, handing Lorenzo a bulletproof vest. 2 exits, front door and fire escape. We've got both covered. He alone? As far as we can tell. But with these Russian crews, you never know. Lorenzo checked his gun. A Glock 19, comfortable weight, familiar grip. Let's keep this quiet. I want him alive. Alive and talking, Dante agreed. They moved in fast. 2 men on the fire escape, 2 on the front stairs. Lorenzo and Dante straight up the middle. The hallway smelled like cigarettes and mildew. Someone's TV was blaring through thin walls. Apartment 3B, Dante knocked. Yuri Volkov, open up. Nothing. Lorenzo nodded. Dante kicked the door in. Yuri was sitting at a card table in the kitchen, gun already drawn. He got 1 shot off, wild, hitting the ceiling, before Dante put 2 rounds in his shoulder. The Russian went down screaming. Lorenzo crossed the room and kicked the gun away. Shut up. Yuri clutched his bleeding shoulder, eyes wide with pain and fear. You're Vieri. That's right. Markov's gonna kill you for this. Markov sent you to shoot a nurse. I don't think he's in a position to make threats. Lorenzo crouched down. Here's how this works. You tell me everything. Who ordered the hit, why, what else Markov's planning. You do that. Maybe you live. You don't, and I let Dante get creative. Dante smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Yuri's gaze darted between them. If I talk, Markov kills my family. If you don't talk, I kill you right now. Choose. The Russian's resistance crumbled fast. Pain and fear did that. It was Markov, he gasped. He wanted to send a message. Said you've been getting too comfortable. Needed to remember that nobody's untouchable. Why Isabella? We were just supposed to hit someone connected to you. Markov didn't care who. We saw her leaving the clinic, recognized her from a photo. Someone said she mattered to you. Lorenzo's vision went red at the edges. Someone. I don't know who. Markov has informants everywhere. Someone told him about the nurse, said you'd been visiting her, spending time at the hospital when her nephew was sick. His nephew, Lorenzo corrected coldly. My nephew. Right, your nephew. Look, we were just following orders. It was supposed to be a warning shot, scare her, scare you. But she turned at the wrong time and you shot her in the stomach. Yuri was crying now, shoulder bleeding through his fingers. I'm sorry, okay? We didn't mean... Lorenzo stood up, looked at Dante. Get him to the doctor, patch him up, then lock him somewhere secure. I'm not done with him yet. What about Markov? Markov just declared war. He just doesn't know it yet. Lorenzo got back to the hospital at 4 a.m. Marco was still posted outside Isabella's room, looking alert despite the late hour. She's been asking for you. She awake? Was an hour ago. Lorenzo slipped inside quietly. The lights were dimmed. Isabella was sleeping, but restlessly. Small movements, furrowed brow. Dreaming, probably. maybe nightmares about the shooting. He sat down in his usual chair and just watched her. The thing about Isabella Cruz was that she'd never asked him for anything, never tried to use his obvious wealth for her own benefit, never played games or angled for position. She just existed in her own orbit of goodness, helping people because that's what she did. And someone had tried to kill her because of him. That was the part Lorenzo couldn't get past. She'd been targeted not for anything she'd done, but because some Russian mobster thought hurting her would hurt Lorenzo, which meant his world had touched hers in the worst possible way. He could end this, right now. Walk away, disappear from her life, make sure Anton Markov and everyone else knew Isabella Cruz meant nothing to Lorenzo Vieri. It would be the smart play, the safe play. But when Lorenzo thought about never seeing her again, never hearing her laugh, or watching her face light up when she talked about her patients, something in his chest felt like it was tearing in half. "You came back." Isabella's voice startled him. She was awake, watching him with those dark eyes. "Didn't mean to wake you," Lorenzo said. "You didn't. I've been sleeping all day. I'm not tired anymore." She shifted carefully, wincing. "Where did you go?" "Had some business to take care of." "What kind of business?" Lorenzo met her gaze. "The kind that makes sure nobody hurts you again." Understanding flickered across her face. "You found them. The people who shot me. One of them. And he confirmed what I already suspected. This wasn't random, Isabella. You were targeted because someone wanted to get to me." She absorbed that. Why would someone want to get to you? This was it. The moment where he either lied or told the truth, where he either protected her from his world or pulled her into it. Lorenzo took a breath. "Because I'm not the person you think I am," he said. "I'm not a businessman, not in any legitimate sense. I run an organization that operates outside the law. Shipping, gambling, protection, influence. Anything that makes money and doesn't ask questions. People call it the mafia, organized crime, whatever. I call it survival. And I've been doing it long enough that I've made enemies, powerful ones." Isabella didn't look shocked, didn't look betrayed or scared or any of the things Lorenzo expected. She just looked sad. "I knew," she said quietly. "What?" "I mean, I didn't know the details, but I knew you weren't just some businessman. The way people act around you, the way you carry yourself, nobody gets that kind of deference by selling insurance or whatever." She paused. "When I saw you with your nephew at the hospital, the way you looked at him, I thought maybe there was more to you than the scary reputation. Was I wrong?" Lorenzo didn't know how to answer that. "I care about him," he said finally. "I care about the people in my family. But I've done things, Isabella, bad things, things that would make you see me differently." "Like what?" "Like hurting people who crossed me, like making problems disappear, like building an empire on fear and leverage and sometimes violence." She was quiet for a long moment. "Have you ever hurt someone who didn't deserve it?" she asked. The question caught him off guard. It's not that simple." "It kind of is, though. Have you ever hurt innocent people? Kids? People who were just in the wrong place at the wrong time?" Lorenzo thought about it, really thought about it. "No," he said. "I have lines. I've always had lines." "Then you're not as bad as you think you are." "Isabella, I'm not saying what you do is right," she interrupted. "I'm not saying I agree with it, or that it doesn't scare me, but I've spent my whole life around people, Lorenzo. I've seen the worst humanity has to offer walk through those hospital doors, and I've learned that most people aren't all good or all bad. They're just people, making choices, some better than others." Lorenzo stared at her. "You should hate me, maybe, but I don't." She reached out slowly, carefully, and touched his hand. "You stayed with me when I was dying. You've been here every day. You're trying to protect me even though it puts you in danger. That means something. It means I'm selfish. It means I can't stay away from you even though I should. Or it means you care about something more than your empire." That hit too close to home. Lorenzo turned his hand over, lacing his fingers through hers. "The man who ordered the hit on you, his name is Anton Markov. He runs the Russian syndicate in New York. We've been at war for months, territorial disputes mostly, but this was personal. He wanted to hurt me, and he used you to do it." "What are you going to do?" "What I have to, end this before it escalates. Make sure he knows you're off limits." "By hurting him back?" By making it clear that crossing certain lines has consequences. Isabella's grip on his hand tightened. Don't become a monster just to protect me. I'm already a monster, Isabella. I made peace with that a long time ago. No. Her voice was firm. You're a man who's made bad choices. There's a difference. Don't forget that. Lorenzo wanted to believe her, wanted to believe he was something other than the sum of his sins. But he'd seen too much, done too much to buy into that kind of redemption. Still, sitting there in the quiet hospital room with her hand in his, he felt something shift, some small crack in the armor he'd built around himself. I need to move you, he said, changing the subject. Somewhere secure. Markov knows you're here, and I can't protect you properly in a public hospital. Move me where? I have a facility, private, heavily guarded, better medical equipment. You'll be safe there while you recover. Isabella hesitated. I can't just disappear. I have a job, an apartment, a life. And someone tried to end that life 4 days ago. Please, Isabella, let me keep you safe, just until this is over. She searched his face. Whatever she saw there must have convinced her because she finally nodded. Okay, but Lorenzo? Yeah? When this is over, when I'm healed and this war or whatever it is with Markov is done, we're going to have a real conversation about what happens next. About what this is between us. What do you think it is? I don't know yet, but I know I want to find out. Lorenzo lifted her hand and kissed her knuckles gently. Then we'll figure it out. Together. It was another promise, and this time he meant it even more than the first. But the transfer happened at dawn. Lorenzo's people moved Isabella in an unmarked ambulance, full medical team, 4 armed guards and escort vehicles. They took a route that zigzagged through Brooklyn, doubling back twice to ensure they weren't followed. The facility was in an industrial area near the water. Unmarked building, reinforced doors, state-of-the-art security. It looked like a warehouse from the outside. Inside, it was a fully equipped medical center. Dr. Sarah Chen met them at the entrance. Late 30s, brilliant trauma surgeon, someone who owed Lorenzo her career and her silence. Room's ready, she said, falling into step beside the gurney. I reviewed her files. Gunshot trauma. Surgery went well, healing normally. I'll monitor her personally. Thank you, Sarah. They got Isabella settled in a private room that looked more like a hotel suite than a hospital. Comfortable bed, actual windows with bulletproof glass, furniture that didn't scream medical facility. Isabella looked around, still a little groggy from the transport. This is where you bring people who need to disappear? Sometimes, Lorenzo admitted. How many people have you brought here? Does it matter? I guess not. She settled back against the pillows. How long do I have to stay? Until you're healed. Until Markov isn't a threat anymore. And if that takes months? Then it takes months. Dr. Chen finished checking vitals and left them alone. Lorenzo pulled a chair close to the bed. I need to handle some things, he said, but I'll be back tonight. Marco's outside, and there are guards on every entrance. You're safe here, Isabella. I promise. I know. She caught his hand before he could stand. Be careful, okay? I know you think you're invincible, but bullets don't care about reputations. I'll be careful. Lorenzo? Yeah? Thank you for all of this. I know it's complicated and dangerous and probably making your life harder, but thank you. He kissed her forehead. Get some rest. As he left, Lorenzo pulled out his phone and called Dante. It's time, he said. Set up a meeting with Markov, face to face. You sure that's smart? I'm sure it's necessary, and make sure every family in New York knows about it. I want this conversation to be public. You're making a statement. I'm drawing a line. After tonight, everyone will know. Touch Isabella Cruz, and they're declaring war on me personally. No more ambiguity. Markov's not going to like that. Markov should have thought about that before he pulled the trigger. Lorenzo hung up and looked back at the building. Behind those reinforced walls, Isabella was safe, healing, waiting, and for the first time in his life, Lorenzo Vieri understood what people meant when they said they'd burn the world down for someone. Because if Markov wanted war, he was about to get more than he bargained for. The king was done playing defense. Now came the reckoning. The meeting was set for midnight at a neutral location, a shuttered restaurant in Little Italy, that had changed hands so many times, nobody remembered who really owned it anymore. Dante had arranged everything, right down to the metal detectors at the door and the two snipers Lorenzo didn't tell him about positioned on rooftops across the street. Lorenzo arrived 15 minutes early with 4 men. Markov was already there with 6. The Russian sat at a table in the center of the empty dining room, expensive suit, rings on 3 fingers, the kind of man who thought gold chains and designer labels made him look powerful instead of desperate. He was younger than Lorenzo, mid-40s, still hungry, still stupid enough to think violence solved everything. Vieri. Markov's accent was thick, theatrical. You wanted to talk, so talk. Lorenzo didn't sit down, didn't smile, just stood there with his hands in his pockets, posture relaxed, eyes cold. You shot someone under my protection, he said simply. That was a mistake. Markov laughed. Your protection? She's a nurse. What, you put everyone who works at hospitals under your umbrella now? Just her. Why, you sleeping with her? That's none of your business. I think it is. Markov leaned back in his chair, enjoying himself. See, word on the street is Lorenzo Vieri, the king of New York, the untouchable boss, has gone soft over some woman. That's interesting information. Makes me wonder what else you've gone soft about. One of Lorenzo's men shifted, hand moving toward his jacket. Lorenzo held up a finger. Everyone froze. I came here to make something very clear, Lorenzo said. Isabella Cruz is off limits, completely. Anyone who touches her, looks at her wrong, even thinks about her in a way I don't like. They answer to me personally, not my organization. Me. That sounds like a threat. It's a statement of fact. I'm drawing a line, Anton. Stay on your side of it. Markov's smile faded. You don't get to draw lines anymore, old man. The city's changing. Your time's almost up. My time's up when I say it is. Really? Because from where I'm sitting, you look distracted, weak, spending all your time playing nurse with some woman instead of running your empire. Markov stood up, buttoning his jacket. Maybe I did you a favor. Reminded you what this life costs. Lorenzo felt the rage building, but kept his voice level. The shooter you sent, Yuri Volkov, he's alive. That got a reaction. Markov's expression flickered. And he's talking, Lorenzo continued. Told me everything. Who gave the order, why, what else you've got planned. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to call off whatever operations you're running in my territory. You're going to pay Isabella's medical expenses, all of them. And you're going to make it known throughout every organization in this city that she's untouchable. Do that, and we can coexist. Don't, and this gets ugly. Markov stared at him for a long moment. Then he started laughing. Not nervous laughter, genuine amusement. You're serious. You actually think I'm going to pay for some nurse's hospital bills because you're in love with her. I think you're going to do it because the alternative is war, and you can't afford that right now. Can't I? Markov's smile turned sharp. You've been bleeding resources for months, Vieri. Your shipments are getting seized. Your politicians are jumping ship. Your protection rackets are drying up. You're running on fumes and reputation, so maybe I can afford a war better than you can. Lorenzo took a step forward. Every gun in the room came up. His men, Markov's men, fingers on triggers, waiting for someone to make a choice they couldn't take back. Then let's find out, Lorenzo said quietly. The silence stretched. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Finally, Markov jerked his head, and his men lowered their weapons. Lorenzo's followed suit. You want war over a woman? Markov said. Fine, but don't say I didn't warn you. This doesn't end well for either of us. It ends when you accept that some things aren't for sale and some people aren't targets. Everything's for sale, Vieri. Everyone's a target. You just forgot that because you've been sitting on your throne too long. Lorenzo turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. The next time someone takes a shot at Isabella Cruz, I won't come looking for the shooter. I'll come looking for you, personally, and I won't bring lawyers or negotiate terms. Understood? Markov didn't answer, didn't need to. The message was delivered. Lorenzo walked out into the cold October night feeling like he'd just lit a fuse. The only question was how long before it reached the dynamite. Dante fell into step beside him. That went well. He's going to retaliate. I know. I've already doubled security on all our operations, and I put extra men on the facility where Isabella's staying. Good. Lorenzo climbed into the back of his car. What about the families? Did they hear about the meeting? Everyone heard about it. You made sure of that. Dante slid in beside him. Opinions split. Half think you're being smart, protecting what's yours. Other half think you're showing weakness, letting a woman dictate strategy. I don't care what they think. You should. Perception matters in this business. If people think you're vulnerable, then let them think it. Let them try something and find out how vulnerable I actually am. Dante was quiet for a moment. You really care about her, don't you? Lorenzo looked out the window at the city passing by. I don't know what I feel, but I know she doesn't deserve to die because of me. Nobody deserves that. Doesn't mean you can save everyone. I can save her. Can you? Because from where I'm standing, the more attention you draw to her, the bigger target she becomes. Lorenzo knew Dante was right. Every move he made to protect Isabella also painted a brighter bullseye on her back. But what was the alternative? Walk away and leave her defenseless? Pretend she didn't matter and hope Markov got bored? No. He'd made his choice. Now he had to live with the consequences. I need you to start pulling files on Markov's entire operation, Lorenzo said. Supply chains, money flows, who he's paying off, where he's vulnerable. If this turns into war, I want to hit him where it hurts. Already working on it. And find out who told him about Isabella in the first place. Someone in our organization has been talking. Dante's jaw tightened. You think we have a leak? I think Markov knew exactly who to target and when. That doesn't happen by accident. They drove in silence the rest of the way to the facility. Lorenzo went straight to Isabella's room and found her awake, reading a book Dr. Chen had brought her. She looked up when he entered. How'd it go? About as well as expected. Which means badly. Which means we understand each other now. Lorenzo sat down in the chair beside her bed. How are you feeling? Sore, bored, ready to leave this place. She closed the book. Dr. Chen says I'm healing faster than expected, though. She thinks I might be able to go home in a week. You can't go home, Isabella. What? Your apartment isn't secure. Markov knows where you live, probably has people watching it. Until this is resolved, you need to stay somewhere safe. Isabella's expression hardened. For how long? I don't know. Days? Weeks? Months? Lorenzo, I have a life. I can't just disappear indefinitely. I know, and I'm sorry. But right now, your safety is more important than your schedule. That's not your decision to make. Actually, it is. You asked me to protect you. This is what that looks like. She stared at him. I didn't ask you to lock me up. I'm not locking you up. I'm keeping you alive. What's the difference? Lorenzo felt his temper rising and forced it down. The difference is you can walk out that door anytime you want. But if you do, Markov wins. He gets to control your life through fear. Is that what you want? I want to go back to work. I want to sleep in my own bed. I want to stop feeling like a prisoner. You're not a prisoner. Then what am I? The question hung between them. Lorenzo didn't have a good answer. What was she? Someone he cared about? Someone he was using as an excuse to go to war? Someone whose life had become collateral damage in a conflict she never asked to be part of? You're someone who matters to me, he said finally. And I won't let anything happen to you. Isabella's anger faded into something sadder. What happens when this is over? When Markov's not a threat anymore? Do I just go back to my normal life and pretend none of this happened? I hope so. And us? What happens to us? Lorenzo looked at her, really looked at her. Even exhausted and recovering, even angry and scared, she was still the brightest thing in his world. The only thing that felt real in a life built on lies and leverage. I don't know, he admitted. I've never done this before, cared about someone enough to change how I operate, but I know I don't want to lose you. You might not have a choice, because the more I learn about your world, the less sure I am that I can live in it. That hurt more than Lorenzo expected. What are you saying? I'm saying I need time to think about what I want, what I can handle, whether any of this is actually sustainable. She reached out and touched his hand. I care about you too, Lorenzo. But caring isn't enough. Not when your life is built on things I fundamentally disagree with. Then what would be enough? I don't know yet. Maybe nothing. Maybe I'm kidding myself thinking this could work. Lorenzo felt something crumbling inside him. Don't do that. Don't give up before we've even tried. I'm not giving up. I'm being realistic. You're a crime boss, Lorenzo. You hurt people for a living, and I'm a nurse who spends her days saving lives. How do those two things coexist? By finding balance, by making compromises. What compromises? You stop being who you are. I accept that the man I care about makes his money through violence and fear? I don't know. Lorenzo stood up, running a hand through his hair. I don't have all the answers, Isabella. All I know is that before I met you, my life made sense. It was clear, simple, transactional, and now everything's complicated and messy, and I can't think straight half the time because I'm too busy worrying about whether you're safe or happy or whether I'm good enough for you. And maybe I'm not. Maybe you deserve better than a man like me, but I'm selfish enough to want you anyway. Isabella was quiet for a long moment. Come here, she said finally. Lorenzo moved back to the chair. She took his hand in both of hers. I don't want perfect, she said. I don't want some sanitized version of you that pretends your past doesn't exist, but I need honesty, complete honesty. No more half-truths or evasions. If we're going to figure this out, I need to know who you really are. All of it. That's a dangerous thing to ask for. I know, but it's the only way this works. Lorenzo considered that. Telling her everything meant exposing parts of himself he'd kept buried for decades, meant admitting to things that would change how she saw him forever. But she was right, half measures wouldn't work. Either he trusted her with the truth, or he didn't. Okay, he said. What do you want to know? Start at the beginning. How does someone become Lorenzo Vieri? So he told her. About growing up poor in Brooklyn, about his father who drank too much, and his mother who worked 3 jobs and still couldn't keep the lights on. About the older kids in the neighborhood who ran errands for local crews and always had money in their pockets. About being 14 and desperate and making his first delivery, a package he didn't ask about to an address he didn't question. About being good at it, smart, reliable, ruthless when he needed to be. About catching the attention of Michael Rossi, the man who ran the docks back then, who saw potential in a hungry kid with no moral hang-ups about how money got made. About working his way up, enforcer, then lieutenant, then right hand. About the things he did to earn that position, the beatings, the intimidation, the occasional body that needed to disappear. About learning to compartmentalize, to separate business from humanity, to become the kind of man people feared. About the night Michael Rossi got arrested and Lorenzo saw his chance. About consolidating power, making alliances, eliminating threats. About building an empire from the scraps of someone else's kingdom. Isabella listened without interrupting. Her expression was hard to read. How many people have you killed? She asked when he finished. Lorenzo had known the question was coming. Personally? 3. Ordered killed? More than I can count. Why? Because they threatened me or mine. Because they broke deals. Because in my world, showing mercy is the same as showing weakness. Do you regret it? Some of them, not all. Which ones do you regret? He thought about it. There was a kid, 22, worked for a rival crew, got caught skimming money, not much, just enough to notice. His boss wanted him dead, asked me to handle it as a favor. I did. Found out later he'd been stealing to pay for his sister's cancer treatment. And the ones you don't regret? The ones who deserved it. The ones who hurt innocence or preyed on weakness. I might be a criminal, Isabella, but I have standards. That's supposed to make it better? No, it's supposed to make it honest. She was quiet again, processing. Lorenzo waited, giving her space to think. What about now? She finally asked. Are you still killing people? Not personally, but yes, people die in my line of work. Rivals, informants, problems that can't be solved any other way. Could you stop? Completely? No, not without losing everything I've built. What if I asked you to? Then I'd have to choose between my empire and you. Isabella pulled her hands back. I can't ask you to do that. It wouldn't be fair. Maybe not. But you're allowed to have boundaries, Isabella. You're allowed to decide what you can live with. What can you live with? She countered. If I told you right now that I can't be with someone who orders people's deaths, what would you do? Lorenzo felt the weight of the question. The honest answer was he didn't know. Walking away from his organization meant giving up everything he'd spent 30 years building. But losing Isabella meant giving up something he'd only just discovered. The possibility of being something more than what he'd always been. "I'd try to find a way to change," he said. "I don't know if I'd succeed. I don't know if it's even possible. But I'd try." "Why?" "Because you make me want to be better." Isabella's eyes were shining. "That's a lot of pressure to put on someone." "I know. I'm sorry." "Don't apologize. Just—" She stopped, searching for words. "Just don't make promises you can't keep. I'd rather have hard truths than pretty lies." "Then here's a hard truth. I don't know how to be the man you deserve. I don't know how to reconcile what I am with what you want me to be. But I know I'm willing to figure it out if you give me the chance." Before Isabella could respond, there was a knock on the door. Dante stuck his head in. "Sorry to interrupt, but we have a situation." Lorenzo stood immediately. "What kind of situation?" "3 of our trucks got hit tonight. Jersey, Brooklyn, and the Bronx, all within an hour. Professional crews knew exactly what they were carrying." "Markov." "Has to be. It's too coordinated to be random." Lorenzo felt the anger rising again. "How bad?" "Lost the shipments, 2 drivers in the hospital, 1 dead. The crews got away clean." Isabella's hand flew to her mouth. "Someone died?" "This is what retaliation looks like," Lorenzo said grimly. "Markov heard what I said at the meeting and decided to push back." "What are you going to do?" "What I have to." He turned to Dante. "Pull everyone back to secure locations. I want inventory of what we lost and projections on how this impacts operations. And double the guard here. If Markov's moving, he might try for Isabella again." "Already done." Lorenzo looked back at Isabella. "I need to go handle this." "By doing what? Hitting him back? Killing more people?" Her voice was rising. "This is exactly what I'm talking about, Lorenzo. This cycle of violence that never ends." "What would you have me do? Let him destroy everything I've built? Let him think he can attack my people without consequences?" "I don't know. But there has to be another way besides more blood." "Not in my world there isn't." They stared at each other, the gulf between them suddenly feeling impossible to cross. "I'll be back later," Lorenzo said finally. "Try to get some rest." He left before she could argue. In the car, Dante briefed him on the details. The hits had been surgical. No collateral damage, no witnesses, just quick, violent strikes that sent a clear message. Markov was escalating. "We need to respond," Dante said. "If we don't, it looks like weakness." "I know. So what's the play?" Lorenzo thought about Isabella's face, the disappointment in her eyes, about the impossible position he was in, defend his empire or prove he was something more than a killer. "Hit his supply lines," he said, "the warehouse in Red Hook where he stores the electronics. But I want it empty when we do. No casualties, no bloodshed. Just make it expensive for him." Dante frowned. "That's not going to send much of a message. It's going to send exactly the message I want to send, that I can hurt him without becoming what he is. And if that's not enough, if he keeps coming, then we escalate, but not yet. Not until I've tried something different." Dante looked skeptical but nodded. "Your call, boss." The hit on Markov's warehouse went down at 3 in the morning. Lorenzo's crew disabled the security, cleared out the inventory, high-end electronics worth close to $2 million on the black market, and torched the building. No guards were hurt. No shots fired. Just money and property turned to ash. Markov would get the message by sunrise. Lorenzo went back to the facility as dawn was breaking. Isabella was asleep, face peaceful in the early light. He sat down in his usual chair and watched her breathe. Dr. Chen found him there an hour later. "She's doing remarkably well," the doctor said quietly. "Another week, and she'll be ready for outpatient care." "Can she stay here longer if needed?" "Of course. But, Lorenzo, keeping her isolated isn't sustainable. Eventually, she's going to need her life back." "I know. Do you?" "Because from what I've seen, you're building a fortress around her instead of dealing with the actual threat." Lorenzo looked at her. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you can't protect her from the world forever. At some point, you have to either eliminate the danger or accept that some risks are unavoidable." "I'm working on eliminating the danger. By going to war with Markov, that just creates new dangers." "Then what's your solution?" Dr. Chen shrugged. "I'm a doctor. not a strategist. But I do know that the stress of this situation isn't helping Isabella heal. She needs stability, normalcy, a sense of control over her own life. She needs to be alive. She needs both. And right now, you're only giving her one. The doctor left him alone with that thought. Lorenzo sat there until Isabella woke up. She blinked at him, momentarily disoriented, then smiled weakly. You're still here. Where else would I be? I don't know. Out starting wars, apparently. But there was no real heat in the words, just exhaustion. I hit Markov's warehouse last night, Lorenzo said. Destroyed his inventory, but nobody got hurt. No casualties, no bloodshed, just property damage. Isabella studied him. Why are you telling me this? Because you were right. The cycle of violence doesn't solve anything. It just creates more problems. So I'm trying something different. Different how? Hurt his operations without hurting people. Make it expensive enough that he backs off. And if he doesn't back off, then I'll figure out something else. But I'm not going to become the monster you're afraid I am. Not if I can help it. Isabella reached for his hand. You're not a monster, Lorenzo. You're just a man trying to survive in a brutal world. But that doesn't mean you have to embrace the brutality. Easy to say, harder to do. I know, but the fact that you're trying matters. It means you haven't given up on being better. Lorenzo lifted her hand and kissed it. I'm trying for you. Try for yourself too, because if you only change for me, it won't last. You have to want it for you. I don't know if I'm capable of that kind of change. Then find out, because I can't love half a person, Lorenzo. Either you commit to being someone different or you stay who you've always been, but you have to choose. The word love hung in the air between them. Neither acknowledged it directly. I'll try, Lorenzo said. That's all I can promise. It's enough. For now. They sat in comfortable silence until a nurse brought Isabella breakfast. Lorenzo stayed while she ate, catching her up on mundane details. Weather, news, anything that didn't involve violence or threats. Trying to give her the normalcy Dr. Chen had talked about. His phone buzzed with a text from Dante. Markov wants another meeting, tonight. Lorenzo showed Isabella the message. What do you think? I think he's either going to offer terms or try to kill you. Probably both. Then don't go. I have to. This needs to end. Isabella set down her fork. Promise me something. Promise me you'll try to talk first. Use words instead of guns. I always try to talk first. No, you go into conversations with your hand already on the trigger. I mean, really talk. Find out what he wants, what would make him back off. Negotiate like a human being instead of a warlord. Lorenzo wanted to argue that it didn't work that way, that men like Markov only understood strength. But maybe that was the old thinking. Maybe there was another way. I'll try, he said again. Good. She squeezed his hand. And Lorenzo, come back. Whatever happens tonight, come back to me. Always. He meant it. But as Lorenzo left the facility and headed toward another meeting with a man who wanted him dead, he couldn't shake the feeling that some promises were harder to keep than others, and this one might cost him everything. The second meeting with Markov took place in an abandoned subway station beneath Canal Street. Neutral ground again, but this time Lorenzo came alone except for Dante waiting 3 blocks away with a team on standby. Isabella's words kept echoing in his head. Talk first, use words instead of guns. He descended the graffitied stairs into the tunnel, footsteps echoing off tile walls that hadn't seen maintenance in decades. Markov was already there, standing under a flickering fluorescent light that made his face look corpse pale. Only 2 bodyguards this time. You came, Markov said, sounding genuinely surprised. You asked for a meeting. I did. But after what you did to my warehouse, I figured you'd send someone to put a bullet in me instead. Lorenzo kept his distance, hands visible. I'm trying something different. Different how? Talking instead of shooting. Novel concept, I know. Markov laughed, but it was bitter. You think talk solves anything? You cost me $2 million last night, Vieri. $2 million. And before that, I lost 3 major distribution channels because of your little crusade. So forgive me if I'm not in a chatty mood. Then why am I here? The Russian lit a cigarette, hands shaking slightly. Lorenzo noticed. Markov was scared or angry or both, operating on emotion instead of strategy. That made him dangerous. I want to know what it'll take, Markov said, to make this stop. Because you're right. We can bleed each other dry, watch our empires crumble, let the Fed swoop in while we're weak. Or we can find a way to coexist. Lorenzo hadn't expected that. You shot Isabella to send a message. You said she was fair game because I'd gotten soft. What changed? What changed is I talked to the other families. You know what they told me? That you're drawing a line, making it clear she's protected, and that anyone who crosses that line answers to you personally. Markov took a drag. And you know what else they said? That maybe you're onto something, that maybe the old ways, hitting families, targeting civilians, maybe that brings too much heat. So this is about self-preservation. Everything's about self-preservation. You should know that. Lorenzo studied him. What do you want, Anton? I want Brooklyn, the waterfront, the shipping routes, everything from Red Hook to Sunset Park. You keep Manhattan, I keep Brooklyn. We split Queens down the middle. Clean territorial division, no more overlap. Brooklyn's worth twice what you're offering in return. Then consider it reparations for the damage you've done to my operations. Markov flicked ash onto the platform. Plus, I back off Isabella completely. Public statement. All my people know she's untouchable. That's worth something, isn't it? It was worth everything. But Lorenzo also knew giving up Brooklyn meant losing millions in revenue, weakening his position with the other families, showing that he could be pressured into concessions. I need time to think about it, Lorenzo said. You have 24 hours. After that, the offer expires and we go back to war. And if I refuse? Markov's smile was cold. Then I stop playing nice. No more property damage, no more surgical strikes. I go after your people directly, your lieutenants, your crew, everyone who works for you. And yeah, maybe Isabella too, despite what the families say, because at the end of the day, I'm not you. I don't have lines I won't cross. You cross that line and you're dead within a week. Maybe. But so are you. And your empire burns with you. Markov dropped the cigarette and crushed it under his heel. Think about it, Vieri. Is Brooklyn worth dying over? Is it worth watching everyone you care about die? Lorenzo wanted to hit him, wanted to draw the gun hidden at his back and end this right here. But he thought about Isabella, about her asking him to try something different. 24 hours, he said. I'll have an answer. Good. Because I'm tired of this, tired of looking over my shoulder, tired of losing money, tired of pretending I enjoy this life. Markov's voice cracked slightly. We're not young anymore, Vieri. How much longer are you planning to keep doing this? It was the first genuine thing the Russian had said. Lorenzo recognized the exhaustion, the question he'd been asking himself for years without finding an answer. Until something better comes along, Lorenzo said. And what if nothing better exists? What if this is all there is? Then I guess we die doing what we know. Markov nodded slowly. Yeah, I guess we do. They stood there in the abandoned station, two men who'd built empires on violence, both wondering if it had been worth it. Lorenzo left first. Dante picked him up 3 blocks away. Well? Dante asked. He wants Brooklyn in exchange for leaving Isabella alone. That's a bad deal. I know. So what are you going to tell him? Lorenzo stared out the window at the city he'd controlled for so long. I don't know yet. They drove to a warehouse in Queens where Lorenzo kept his real office, not the downtown penthouse where he met legitimate business contacts, but the place where actual decisions got made. Dante poured them both whiskey while Lorenzo paced. Talk it through, Dante said. What are the options? Option 1. I give him Brooklyn. Isabella's safe, the war ends, but I lose face and revenue. Option 2. I refuse and we go to war for real. People die. Operations suffer. Feds get interested. Maybe I win. Maybe I don't. Option 3. Lorenzo drank the whiskey in one swallow. There is no option 3. That's the problem. What if there was? Dante leaned forward. What if instead of giving him Brooklyn or fighting him for it, you gave him something else, something he wants more? Like what? Information, protection, a way out. Dante pulled out his phone and scrolled through files. I've been digging into Markov's operation. He's bleeding money, yeah, but not just because of us. He's got federal investigators crawling up his ass, the IRS looking at his shell companies, and his own people are starting to question his leadership. The man's desperate. Lorenzo sat down. Keep talking. What if you offered him a deal that doesn't involve territory? What if you helped him clean up his legal problems, made some of his troubles disappear? In exchange, he backs off completely. Not just Isabella, but all his expansion plans. He keeps what he has, you keep what you have, and nobody has to die. Why would I help him? Because it ends this without bloodshed. Because it shows the other families you're smart enough to find solutions that don't involve body counts. Because it might be what Isabella needs to see, that you can operate differently. Lorenzo considered it. The idea had merit, but it also meant trusting Markov to hold up his end, which was a gamble. What kind of legal problems are we talking about? He asked. Dante pulled up documents. He's got 3 shell companies the IRS is investigating, 2 lieutenants who flipped and are cooperating with the FBI, and a money laundering case building in federal court. Any one of those could bring down his whole organization. And we can make them go away? We've got people in the right places. Judges who owe favors, prosecutors on payroll, accountants who can make evidence disappear. It'd cost money and capital, but yeah, we can make it happen. Lorenzo thought about the conversation in the subway station, about Markov's exhaustion and fear. The Russian wasn't trying to build an empire anymore. He was trying to survive. Set up another meeting, Lorenzo said, but not alone this time. I want witnesses, representatives from the other families. Make it official. You're really going to do this? I'm going to try. If it works, we end this without more violence. If it doesn't, at least I tried. Dante raised his glass. To trying new things. To not knowing if they'll work. They drank. Lorenzo went back to the facility around midnight. Isabella was awake, reading again. She looked up when he entered, searching his face. You're alive, she said. Told you I'd come back. How'd it go? Lorenzo sat down and told her everything. The meeting, Markov's offer, his conversation with Dante, the plan to offer legal help instead of territory. Isabella listened carefully. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. That's smart, she said finally. Risky, but smart. You think it'll work? I think it shows you're willing to think beyond violence. That matters. Even if it fails? Especially if it fails. Because at least you tried something different. She closed her book. When's the meeting? Tomorrow night. I'm bringing in the other families to witness the agreement. Make it binding. What if Markov says no? Then I'll have to decide, give him Brooklyn or go to war. Isabella reached for his hand. And what are you leaning toward? Lorenzo hesitated. Honestly, part of me wants to give him Brooklyn just to end this. But the other part knows that sets a precedent, that threatening you is an effective way to manipulate me, and I can't let that stand. So you'd rather fight? I'd rather not have to choose. But you do have to choose, Lorenzo. That's what being human means. Making impossible choices and living with the consequences. What would you choose? Isabella smiled sadly. I'd choose your life over Brooklyn any day. But I'm not you. I don't have an empire to protect or people depending on me to be strong, so my answer doesn't matter. It matters to me. Then hear this. I don't want you to give up everything you've built because of me, but I also don't want you to become someone you hate just to keep it. Find the middle ground, Lorenzo. Find the version of yourself you can live with. What if that version loses everything? Then we figure it out together. The word we settled between them, warm and terrifying. Lorenzo squeezed her hand. I should let you rest. Stay, Isabella said, just for a while. I sleep better when you're here. So he stayed, sitting in the chair while she drifted off, her hand still in his. He stayed until his own exhaustion pulled him under, slumped awkwardly in the uncomfortable chair. He woke to Isabella's fingers running through his hair. You fell asleep, she said softly. What time is it? Almost 6. You've been out for hours. Lorenzo stretched, joints protesting. Sorry, didn't mean to crash here. I don't mind. She was smiling. You look more human when you sleep. Less scary mob boss, more just man. Careful. That's dangerous talk. Why? Because it makes me think things are possible that probably aren't. Isabella's smile faded. Like what? Like a normal life. Like waking up next to you in a house that isn't a fortress. Like being someone you could actually build a future with. Lorenzo, I know. I know it's not realistic. I know my world doesn't allow for normal. But when I'm with you, I forget that sometimes. Isabella pulled him closer. Then don't forget. Keep that feeling. Hold on to it. Because that's the part of you worth saving. They stayed like that until Dr. Chen knocked and entered for morning rounds. How's our patient? The doctor asked. Ready to leave, Isabella said. How much longer? Another few days at least. I want to make sure the internal healing is complete before we release you. Release me to where? I can't go home. Dr. Chen glanced at Lorenzo. That's above my pay grade. After the doctor left, Isabella turned to Lorenzo. I can't stay here forever. I know. So what's the plan? Honestly, I don't know yet. Get through tonight's meeting with Markov. See if we can end this peacefully. After that, we figure out the rest. And if the meeting goes badly, then I have bigger problems than where you're staying. Isabella frowned. You're not going alone, are you? I'm bringing Dante and security, and the other families will be there. It's supposed to be neutral ground. Supposed to be. I'll be careful. Promise? Promise. He left before she could see the doubt in his eyes. The meeting was set for 8 p.m. at a private club in Midtown that had been hosting underworld negotiations since Prohibition. Lorenzo arrived with Dante and 4 men. Representatives from 5 other families were already there, the Italians, the Irish, the Chinese, even the Colombians. Everyone with a stake in maintaining peace. Markov came in 10 minutes late, looking haggard. The Russian had clearly not slept, dark circles under his eyes, suit rumpled. They sat around a large table in a private room. An older Italian named Vincent DeMarco, unofficial mediator for these kinds of meetings, called it to order. Gentlemen, Vincent said in his gravelly voice, we're here because Lorenzo Vieri and Anton Markov have a territorial dispute that's affecting all our operations. Too much heat, too much violence, too much attention. So let's find a solution. Markov spoke first. I offered Vieri a clean deal, Brooklyn for peace. He refused. I didn't refuse, Lorenzo corrected. I asked for time to consider alternatives. And? You have an alternative? This was it. The moment where Lorenzo either followed the old playbook or tried something new. I do, he said. You're facing federal investigations on 3 fronts. IRS looking at your companies, FBI building cases against your lieutenants, prosecutors digging into your money laundering. Any one of those cases goes to trial, you're done. Your whole organization collapses. Markov's face went pale. How do you? I have better intelligence than you do. But here's what I'm offering. I make those problems disappear. All 3 cases, gone. In exchange, you back off completely. No expansion into my territory, no threats against Isabella or anyone else under my protection, no retaliation, clean slate. The room went quiet. This wasn't how these negotiations usually went. You can do that? Markov asked carefully. I can. I have people in the right positions, favors I can call in. It'll cost me, but I can make it happen. Why would you? Because I'm tired of war. Because bleeding each other accomplishes nothing. Because maybe there's a way to operate that doesn't require constant violence. Vincent leaned forward. You're proposing cooperation instead of territory division? I'm proposing we stop acting like the only tool we have is a hammer. There are other ways to solve problems. The Chinese representative, a woman named Li, who ran most of the heroin trade, spoke up. And if Markov agrees to this, what stops him from breaking the agreement later? Same thing that stops any of us, Lorenzo said. Reputation. If he goes back on this deal, every family here witnesses it. He becomes an outcast. Nobody works with him. Nobody trusts him. His organization dies slowly instead of quickly. Markov was staring at him. You're serious. You'd actually do this. If you agree to the terms, yes. What's the catch? No catch. Just one condition. If you ever threaten Isabella Cruz again, if you even think about her in a way I don't like, the deal's off, and I come for you personally. No warning, no negotiation. Understood? Markov nodded slowly. Understood. Then we have a deal? The Russian looked around the table at the witnesses, at the representatives who would hold both men accountable. His hands were shaking slightly. We have a deal, he said finally. Vincent DeMarco pulled out a document, something his people had prepared in advance, covering the basic framework. Both men signed it. The witnesses signed as observers. Just like that, the war was over. After the meeting, Dante pulled Lorenzo aside. That was either brilliant or insane. Probably both. You realize you just committed to making federal cases disappear? That's going to cost serious capital with our contacts. I know. And you're trusting Markov to honor this agreement. I'm trusting the other families to enforce it. He breaks his word, he becomes everyone's problem. Dante studied him. This is because of her, isn't it? Isabella. Lorenzo didn't answer immediately. It's because I'm tired of doing things the same way and expecting different results. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. But at least I tried something. She's changing you. Is that a bad thing? I don't know yet. Ask me in 6 months. Lorenzo went straight back to the facility. Isabella was sitting up in bed, sketching in a notebook Dr. Chen had brought her. It's done, he said from the doorway. She looked up. What's done? The war, the threat. Markov and I made a deal. I help him with his legal problems. He backs off completely. It's over. Isabella set down the notebook. Just like that? Just like that. Do you trust him to keep his word? I trust the other families to hold him accountable. It's the best I can do. She stood carefully, still moving slowly because of her healing injuries, and crossed to him. Put her hands on his chest. You did it, she said. You found another way. I tried to. We'll see if it actually works. It'll work. Because you made it clear the consequences of breaking the deal are worse than keeping it. She looked up at him. I'm proud of you. Those 4 words hit Lorenzo harder than anything Markov had said. Nobody had been proud of him in decades. Nobody had looked at him like he was capable of being better. Don't be proud yet, he said. I still have to actually make those federal cases disappear. That's going to cost favors I can't get back. But you're willing to do it anyway. For you? Yeah, I'm willing. Isabella pulled him closer. Not just for me, for yourself too. Because you want to prove you can solve problems without violence. Maybe. Definitely. She kissed him softly. Thank you. For what? For trying. For choosing a different path. For showing me you're more than what you've been. Lorenzo held her, feeling something shift in his chest. Something that felt dangerously close to hope. What happens now? He asked quietly. Now you follow through on the deal. Make Markov's problems disappear, prove the agreement works, and I finish healing so I can get out of this place. Where will you go? I don't know yet. My apartment's not safe, you said. You could stay with me, Lorenzo offered, then immediately regretted how desperate it sounded. I mean, I have a place in Manhattan. Secure, comfortable, plenty of space. You'd have your own room, complete privacy, just until you figure out what's next. Isabella smiled. Are you asking me to move in with you? I'm asking you to have a safe place to recover. The rest, we can figure out as we go. She considered it. Okay. Okay. Okay, I'll stay with you, temporarily, while I figure things out. She kissed him again. But Lorenzo, this doesn't fix everything. We still have a lot to work through. I know. I mean it. My staying with you doesn't mean I'm okay with everything you do or that I've made peace with your world. It just means I want to give us, a real chance, see if it can actually work. That's all I'm asking for, a chance. Then you've got one. Don't waste it. Lorenzo pulled her close, breathing in the scent of hospital soap, and something underneath that was purely Isabella. I won't. I promise. For the first time in weeks, he actually believed things might be okay. The next 3 days were a blur of activity. Lorenzo called in favors he'd been saving for years. A federal prosecutor in Brooklyn who owed him for keeping his gambling debts quiet. An IRS investigator who'd once needed evidence to disappear. A defense attorney with connections to judges who valued their privacy. One by one, Markov's legal problems started evaporating. Documents went missing. Witnesses recanted. Cases lost momentum and priority. It cost Lorenzo millions in favors and cash. But by the end of the week, all 3 investigations had stalled out. He met Markov one final time at a coffee shop in Queens. It's done, Lorenzo said. Your cases are dead. You're clear. Markov looked like he'd aged 10 years. I don't know what to say. Say you'll honor the agreement. I will. I swear on my mother's grave, I will. The Russian's hands were shaking around his coffee cup. You could have destroyed me, Vieri. Could have let those cases proceed, watched me burn. Why didn't you? Lorenzo thought about Isabella, about her asking him to try something different. Because destruction isn't the only option. Sometimes building bridges works better than burning them. That's not how this world works. Maybe it should be. Markov laughed bitterly. You've changed. The Lorenzo Vieri I knew 6 months ago would have taken my offer for Brooklyn and made me feel grateful for it, or refused and gone to war without blinking. But this, mercy, compromise, cooperation, that's new. People change. Because of her, the nurse? Because I wanted to. Do you love her? The question caught Lorenzo off guard. Did he love Isabella? He wasn't sure he knew what love was anymore, if he'd ever known, but he knew she made him want to be different, better, knew the thought of losing her felt like dying. I think so, he said honestly, still figuring it out. Markov nodded slowly. Then I hope it works out, Vieri. I really do. Because if you gave up Brooklyn and burned all that capital just for a chance with her, it better be worth it. I think it will be. They shook hands. It felt strange, making peace with someone who'd tried to kill Isabella weeks earlier. But maybe that was growth, accepting that people could change, that old enemies didn't have to stay enemies forever. Lorenzo left the coffee shop and called Dante. It's done, he said. Markov's clear and the deal holds. Spread the word. Already on it. The families are impressed, by the way, calling it smart diplomacy. Or weakness, depending who you ask. Screw what they think. You ended a war without losing people or territory. That's a win, however you spin it. Lorenzo hung up and drove to the facility. Isabella was dressed in real clothes for the first time since the shooting. Jeans and a sweater Dr. Chen had brought her. She was signing discharge papers. Ready? Lorenzo asked. More than ready. She looked at him. Is it really over? It's really over. Markov's legal problems are gone, the agreement holds, and every family in New York knows you're untouchable. How much did it cost you? Does it matter? It matters to me. I don't want to be the reason you bankrupt yourself or lose your empire. Lorenzo took her bag. You're not bankrupting me. I'm choosing to invest my resources differently. There's a difference. They walked out to his car together. Marco drove them to Manhattan, to the penthouse Lorenzo kept in a building he owned near Central Park. Isabella had never been there before. The elevator opened directly into the apartment. 12 rooms, floor-to-ceiling windows, furniture that cost more than most people's cars. Isabella walked through slowly, taking it all in. This is where you live? She asked. Sometimes. I also have a place in Brooklyn, but this one's more secure. It's beautiful. She stopped at the windows overlooking the park. And completely intimidating. Why intimidating? Because it reminds me how different our worlds are. I live in a studio in Queens, Lorenzo. I can fit my entire apartment in your living room. He came up behind her. Does that bother you? I don't know yet. Ask me in a week. Lorenzo showed her to a guest room, spacious, ensuite bathroom, view of the park. This is yours. Everything you need should be here, but if not, just ask. Isabella set down her bag. Thank you for all of this. You don't have to thank me. I do, though. Because you didn't have to do any of it. You could have walked away, let Markov win, protected yourself and your empire, but you didn't. Walking away wasn't an option. Why not? Lorenzo looked at her standing in the doorway, backlit by afternoon sun, still healing but stronger every day. Because you matter more than any of it. The territory, the money, the power, none of that means anything if you're not here. Isabella crossed to him. That's a lot of pressure to put on one person. I know, but it's true anyway. She kissed him, slow and careful because her injuries still hurt. When she pulled back, her eyes were shining. I'm scared, she admitted. Scared this won't work. Scared I'll wake up one day and realize I can't live in your world. Scared you'll realize I'm not worth all the trouble. You're worth it, and we'll figure out the rest. Promise? Promise. They stood there holding each other as the sun set over Central Park, two people from impossible worlds trying to build something new. And for the first time since Isabella had been shot, Lorenzo let himself believe it might actually work. The first week was harder than either of them expected. Isabella had her own routine: physical therapy in the mornings to rebuild strength, reading in the afternoons, restless energy by evening because her body was healing faster than her patience. Lorenzo tried to give her space while also making sure she had everything she needed, which meant he was constantly second-guessing himself. Too attentive felt suffocating. Too distant felt cold. They danced around each other in the massive apartment like strangers trying to share a too-small room. On the fourth night, Isabella found him in his study at 2 a.m, hunched over financial reports with a glass of scotch. "Can't sleep?" she asked from the doorway. Lorenzo looked up, startled. "Did I wake you?" "No, I just can't get comfortable." She came in and sat in the chair across from his desk. "What are you working on?" "Damage control, fixing the holes in my operation from the past few weeks." "Is it bad?" "Bad enough. Lost revenue from the shipments Markov hit, capital spent making his legal problems disappear, relationships I had to repair with the families. Nothing I can't recover from, but it'll take time." Isabella was quiet for a moment. "Do you regret it? The deal with Markov? Everything you gave up?" Lorenzo set down his pen. "No." "Not even a little?" "Not even a little." He stood and came around the desk, leaning against it. "Isabella, I've spent 30 years building this empire. I know exactly what it costs to maintain it. Money, favors, pieces of myself I can't get back. But in all that time, I never had a reason to do it differently. Until you. That's a lot of weight to put on me." "I know, but it's true. You make me want to prove I'm more than what I've been." She looked at him with those dark, searching eyes. "What if I can't live with what you've been? What if knowing everything you've done is too much?" "Then you tell me, and we figure out what comes next. But don't lie to yourself or to me. If this isn't going to work, I need to know now before I—" He stopped. "Before you what?" "Before I fall any harder." Isabella stood and crossed to him. She was close enough that he could smell the lavender soap she'd been using, could see the small scar forming where the bullet had entered. "I'm already in too deep to walk away easily," she said quietly. "But I'm also terrified, Lorenzo, of your world, of what loving you might cost, of waking up one day and not recognizing myself anymore." "You think I'd change you?" "I think proximity to violence changes everyone, even people who don't participate in it." Lorenzo wanted to argue but couldn't. She was right. "So what do we do?" "We take it one day at a time. We're honest with each other, and we set boundaries." "What kind of boundaries?" Isabella took a breath. "I need you to keep your work separate from our life together. When you're here, in this apartment, you're just Lorenzo, not the boss, not the king of New York, just the man who sits with dying children and tries to do better. And when I'm not here, you do what you have to do, but you don't bring it home. You don't tell me details I can't unhear or involve me in decisions that would make me complicit. Can you do that?" It would mean compartmentalizing his life in ways he'd never had to before. But Lorenzo had been compartmentalizing since he was 14. "I can try," he said. "That's all I ask." She kissed him then, soft and tentative, like she was testing whether this could really work. Lorenzo pulled her closer, careful of her healing wounds, and kissed her back with everything he couldn't find words for. When they broke apart, Isabella smiled. "You should come to bed. You look exhausted." "I have work to finish." "It'll still be there tomorrow. Come on." She took his hand and led him out of the study, down the hall to his bedroom. They'd been avoiding this space, Isabella sleeping in the guest room, Lorenzo collapsing wherever he happened to be when exhaustion finally caught up. But now she pulled him toward the bed, kicked off her shoes, and climbed under the covers. "What are you doing?" Lorenzo asked. "Establishing a new boundary. At 2 a.m, you don't work. You sleep, preferably with me." "Isabella, just sleep, Lorenzo. Nothing else. I just want you here." So he took off his shoes and his jacket and climbed in beside her. She curled against him, head on his chest, and within minutes her breathing had evened out. Lorenzo lay there in the dark, feeling the weight of her against him, and thought about all the women who'd passed through his life over the years. Affairs that lasted weeks or months, Transactional relationships where everyone knew the score. None of them had ever asked him to just sleep beside them. None of them had wanted the quiet, unglamorous parts of him. Isabella did, and it scared him how much that mattered. He finally fell asleep around 4, her hand tangled in his shirt, and woke at 9 to find her gone. Panic hit him for exactly 3 seconds before he heard her voice in the kitchen, talking to someone. Lorenzo pulled on a shirt and went to investigate. Isabella was at the stove making eggs while Dante sat at the island with coffee, both of them laughing about something. "Morning," Lorenzo said. They both turned. Isabella smiled. "I made breakfast. Dante showed up looking for you, so I fed him." "She's a keeper, boss," Dante said. "Anyone who can make eggs this good in a kitchen, this fancy, deserves a medal." Lorenzo poured himself coffee. "What are you doing here?" "We need to talk about the Chen situation." "Not now. It's kind of urgent." "I said not now." Lorenzo's voice had an edge that made Dante's eyebrows rise. Isabella looked between them. "I can give you privacy if you need it." "No," Lorenzo said firmly. "We're having breakfast. Dante can come back later." Dante stood, reading the room. "Right. I'll be in the car when you're ready." He nodded to Isabella. "Thanks for the eggs." After he left, Isabella turned off the stove. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did. I told you, when I'm here, work stays outside." "Even urgent work?" "Especially urgent work. Let Dante handle it. That's what I pay him for." Isabella studied him. "You're really trying, aren't you?" "I told you I would." "I know. It's just, seeing it is different than hearing it." She plated the eggs and brought them to the table. "Eat. Then you can go deal with whatever the Chen situation is." They ate in comfortable silence. Lorenzo realized he couldn't remember the last time he'd had a quiet breakfast with someone. No business discussions or strategic planning, just food and company. "I want to go back to work," Isabella said suddenly. Lorenzo looked up. "You're not healed enough yet." "Dr. Chen cleared me for light duty. I can do clinic hours, see patients who aren't critical. I need to do something, Lorenzo. I'm going crazy sitting around all day." "It's not safe. You said the threat was over, that Markov backed off, and everyone knows I'm protected." "I said the immediate threat was over. That doesn't mean there's no risk." Isabella set down her fork. "So what am I supposed to do? Hide in this apartment forever? Give up my entire life because it might be dangerous?" "Just for a while longer, until things settle." "Things in your world never settle. There's always another threat, another war, another reason to be careful." Her voice was rising. "I'm a nurse, Lorenzo. Helping people isn't just my job, it's who I am. You can't ask me to give that up." "I'm not asking you to give it up. I'm asking you to be smart about it." "Smart or scared? Because from where I'm sitting, they look the same." Lorenzo felt his frustration mounting. "You got shot, Isabella. 3 weeks ago, someone put a bullet in you and you almost died. Forgive me for wanting to make sure that doesn't happen again." "By keeping me locked up? By controlling where I go and what I do?" "By protecting you." They were both standing now, the argument escalating in ways neither had intended. "I don't want to be protected," Isabella said. "I want to live my life. And if that means taking some risks, then I'll take them. Not on my watch." "It's not your choice to make." The silence that followed was heavy with everything they weren't saying. Lorenzo saw hurt flash across Isabella's face, followed by something that looked like resignation. "You're right," she said quietly. "It's not your choice. It's mine. And I'm choosing to go back to work. If you have a problem with that, maybe we need to reconsider this whole arrangement." She walked out before Lorenzo could respond. He stood there in this kitchen, hands shaking with anger and fear and the horrible realization that she was right. He was trying to control her, trying to keep her safe by limiting her freedom, and that wasn't protection. It was possession. Lorenzo found her in her room, throwing clothes into a bag. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Leaving. This was a mistake. I thought we could make it work, but you can't stop being who you are, and I can't stop being who I am, so we're stuck." "Isabella, wait." "Wait for what? For you to decide when it's safe enough for me to have my life back? That could be never, Lorenzo." He crossed the room and took the bag from her hands. "You're right." That stopped her. "What?" "You're right. I'm trying to control you because I'm terrified of losing you. But that's not fair and it's not sustainable. So if you want to go back to work, go back to work. Isabella stared at him. Just like that? Just like that. But let me put security on you. Not obvious, not intrusive, just someone watching from a distance. Let me have that much peace of mind. Lorenzo, please, I know I don't have the right to ask, but I'm asking anyway. Let me know you're safe while you're out there doing what you need to do. Isabella's anger seemed to drain away. You're serious? Completely. She sat down on the bed. This is hard for you. You have no idea. Then help me understand. Why is it so hard to let me make my own choices? Lorenzo sat beside her. Because everyone I've ever cared about has either left or been taken from me. My mother died when I was 17. My mentor went to prison. The handful of people I trusted over the years, they're dead or gone or turned on me. And then you came along. And for the first time in decades, I felt like maybe life could be more than just survival. But I don't know how to do that without trying to control everything, without making sure all the variables are accounted for. It's how I've stayed alive this long. But I'm not a variable, Lorenzo. I'm a person. And you can't control people without destroying what makes them worth caring about. I know. I just don't know how to stop. Isabella took his hand. You start by trusting me, by believing I can take care of myself and make smart choices. And when you get scared, you talk to me instead of trying to lock me up. And if something happens to you, then we deal with it together. But you can't live your whole life preventing things that might never happen. That's not living, it's just existing. Lorenzo knew she was right, had known it the moment she'd called him out in the kitchen. But knowing and doing were different things. I'll try, he said, but you have to meet me halfway. Take the security, check in regularly, don't go anywhere too isolated. Can you do that? I can do that. And if I slip up, if I start getting controlling again, you call me on it immediately. Oh, don't worry, I will. A small smile cracked through his tension. I believe you. Isabella leaned against him. We're going to fight sometimes. You know that, right? We're too different not to. I know. But fighting doesn't mean it's over. It means we care enough to work through the hard stuff. Is that what you learned in nursing school? That's what I learned from watching my parents. They fought like hell sometimes, but they always came back to each other. Always chose love over pride. Lorenzo kissed the top of her head. Your parents sound smart. They were. Are. They're retired in Florida now, living their best life. She paused. They're going to want to meet you eventually. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Depends on whether you can handle my mother interrogating you about your intentions. I've been interrogated by federal prosecutors. How bad can your mother be? Isabella laughed. You have no idea. The tension between them eased. They sat there on the bed, not quite back to where they'd been before the fight, but closer to understanding how to navigate the distance. When do you want to start back at work? Lorenzo asked. Tomorrow. There's a clinic in the Bronx that needs volunteers for their evening shift. Every instinct Lorenzo had screamed danger. The Bronx, evening hours, exposed positions. But he forced himself to breathe through it. Okay, he said. I'll have Marco assign someone to shadow you. Not Marco himself? Marco's too obvious. I'll use someone who looks like they belong, maybe a medical student or another volunteer. You have people who can pass as medical students? Isabella, I have people who can pass as anything. She shook her head, but she was smiling. Your world is so weird. You're just now figuring that out? I'm just now accepting it. That felt significant somehow, like another small step toward making this work. Lorenzo's phone buzzed, Dante again, probably wondering if he could come back up. Lorenzo ignored it. I should let you get to work, Isabella said. I know Dante has something urgent. It can wait. Lorenzo, part of meeting each other halfway means you don't ignore your responsibilities just to prove a point. Go handle your business. I'll be here when you're done. He wanted to argue, but recognized the wisdom in it. You sure? I'm sure. Besides, I need to call the clinic and confirm my hours. Lorenzo stood and pulled her up with him. Thank you. For what? For fighting with me instead of just leaving. For giving me a chance to do better. Isabella kissed him. You're worth the effort, even when you're being impossible. High praise. Don't let it go to your head. Lorenzo left her and went down to the car where Dante was waiting. Everything okay? Dante asked as Lorenzo slid into the back seat. Define okay. You and the nurse. You looked tense when I left. We had a disagreement. We worked through it. That's new for you. What is? Working through disagreements instead of just ending relationships when they get complicated. Lorenzo looked out the window. Yeah, well, she's worth it. I can see that. Dante pulled out his tablet. The Chen situation, we've got a problem with one of the suppliers. Someone's been skimming, and when we traced it back, it led to Chen's cousin, the one who runs the warehouses in Jersey. How much? Close to 300,000 over the past 6 months. Lorenzo felt the familiar cold calculation taking over. 6 months ago, he would have handled this swiftly and violently. Example made, problem solved. But now Isabella's voice was in his head, asking him to be different. Set up a meeting, Lorenzo said, with Chen and his cousin. I want to hear what he has to say before we do anything. Dante blinked. You want to talk to him? Is that so surprising? Kind of, yeah. Usually you'd have already sent someone to handle it. Well, I'm trying something new. See if we can resolve this without violence. And if he's not cooperative, then we escalate. But let's start with conversation. Dante made notes. You know the other families are going to hear about this, about you going soft. Let them. I don't care what they think. You should care. Perception is reality in this business. If people think you've lost your edge, then they'll test me, and I'll show them I haven't. But I'm not going to keep doing things the old way just because it's expected. Dante was quiet for a moment. She really has changed you. Is that bad? I don't know yet. Change can be good or it can get you killed. Time will tell which one this is. The meeting with Chen happened 2 days later in a warehouse Lorenzo owned in Jersey. Chen was a heavy-set man in his 50s who'd been running gambling operations for Lorenzo for almost a decade. His cousin, younger, nervous, sweating through his shirt, stood beside him. Mr. Vieri, Chen said with a slight bow. Thank you for agreeing to meet. Thank you for coming, Lorenzo gestured to chairs Dante had set up. Sit. Let's talk about the $300,000 that went missing from my accounts. The cousin looked like he might throw up. Chen put a hand on his shoulder. My cousin Tommy made a mistake, Chen said carefully. A very stupid mistake. But he wants to make it right. I'm listening. Tommy found his voice, shaky as it was. I got in debt. Gambling, mostly. Not at our places, other places, where I thought nobody would notice. But the interest kept building, and I got desperate. I thought I could borrow from the warehouse accounts, pay it back before anyone noticed. How much do you still owe? Lorenzo asked. 200,000. I paid back some of it, but you got in deeper. Tommy nodded miserably. I'm sorry, Mr. Vieri. I'll pay it all back, I swear. Just give me time. 6 months ago, Lorenzo would have had Dante take Tommy out back and make sure he never gambled again. But Isabella's voice was still in his head, asking him to find another way. Here's what's going to happen, Lorenzo said. You're going to work off the debt, every cent with interest, but not by skimming from my operations, by managing one of my legal businesses. I've got a restaurant in Brooklyn that needs a new manager. You'll work there, 70 hours a week if that's what it takes, and every paycheck goes toward what you owe. Do that for however long it takes, and we're square. Tommy's eyes went wide. You're not going to... you're letting me work it off? I'm giving you a chance to make this right. Don't make me regret it. I won't, Mr. Vieri. I swear I won't. Chen looked equally shocked. This is very generous. It's practical. Tommy has skills and I can use them. Killing him or breaking his legs doesn't get my money back. This way, everyone benefits. After they left, Dante turned to Lorenzo. You know that's going to be seen as weak or smart. I get my money back, gain a manager I can trust because he owes me everything, and nobody has to die. How is that weak? Because the old Lorenzo Vieri would have made an example. Now people are going to think they can steal from you and just pay it back. Then we make it clear. This is a one-time offer. Next person who steals doesn't get the same deal. But Tommy gets a chance because he came clean and his cousin vouched for him. Dante shook his head. I hope you know what you're doing. So do I. Lorenzo got home that evening to find Isabella in the kitchen again, this time making pasta from scratch. Flour covered the counter. and her hands, a smudge of it on her cheek. "How was your first day back?" he asked. "Exhausting. Amazing. Perfect." She was smiling wider than he'd seen in weeks. "I saw 12 patients, helped with 2 minor procedures, and remembered why I do this. How was your day?" "Different than usual. I gave someone a second chance instead of having them killed." Isabella looked up. "Seriously?" "Seriously. Guy stole 300,000 from me, but instead of the usual response, I'm letting him work it off." "Lorenzo, that's actually really great." "You think so?" "I think it shows you're willing to see people as more than just problems to eliminate. That's growth." Lorenzo moved closer. "I'm trying to be the man you think I can be." "You're already that man. You just forget sometimes." She kissed him, leaving a flowery smudge on his jacket. "Oops." "It's fine. I've got dry cleaners." "Of course you do." She went back to rolling dough. "Stay for dinner? I'm making carbonara." "I wouldn't miss it." They fell into a rhythm over the next few weeks. Isabella worked her clinic shifts with one of Lorenzo's people shadowing her discreetly. Lorenzo ran his empire but tried to leave the violence at the door when he came home. They fought sometimes, about his overprotectiveness, about her stubbornness, about the fundamental differences in how they saw the world. But they always came back to each other. One night in November, Isabella came home from a particularly brutal shift at the hospital where she'd picked up extra hours. A kid had died, 10 years old, cancer, nothing anyone could do. She walked into the apartment, dropped her bag, and just started crying. Lorenzo found her in the hallway, slid down the wall beside her, and pulled her close. "I hate this sometimes," she said through tears. "I hate that I can't save everyone, that medicine has limits, that good kids die for no reason." "I know. You don't. You can't. Because in your world, when something bad happens, you can do something about it. You can hit back, make someone pay, fix it. But I can't fix this. I just have to watch them suffer and try to make it hurt less." Lorenzo held her while she cried, not offering platitudes or solutions, just being there. When she finally calmed down, she pulled back and wiped her eyes. "Sorry, that was a lot." "Don't apologize. You're allowed to break sometimes." "Do you ever break?" "Not in ways people can see." "What about in ways people can't see?" Lorenzo thought about the nights he couldn't sleep, the memories that haunted him, the weight of every choice he'd made. "Yeah, sometimes." "What do you do when that happens?" "Usually, work, drink, pretend I'm fine." He paused. "But tonight, I'm going to sit here with you and admit I'm not fine either. That watching you hurt makes me want to burn the world down, and I can't, so I feel useless." Isabella leaned against him. "We're quite a pair." "Yeah, we are." They sat there in the hallway for an hour, neither speaking, just existing in shared brokenness. It felt more intimate than anything physical they'd done. Later, in bed, Isabella said quietly, "I love you." Lorenzo's breath caught. "What?" "I love you. I know it's complicated and probably stupid and might end badly, but I do. I love you." "Isabella, you don't have to say it back. I just needed you to know." But Lorenzo did say it back, because it was true, and because he'd been carrying it around for weeks without knowing what to call it. "I love you too," he said. "And you're right. It's complicated and might end badly, but I don't care. I'd rather have complicated with you than easy with anyone else." She kissed him, and they made love slowly, carefully, two broken people trying to be whole together. Afterward, Lorenzo lay awake while Isabella slept against him. He thought about how much his life had changed in a few short months. How he'd gone from being a man who solved problems with violence to someone who looked for other options first. How he'd opened his home and his heart to someone who saw all his worst parts and chose him anyway. It terrified him, because now he had something to lose, something worth protecting, something that made all the power and money and control feel meaningless by comparison. And in his world, the things you loved were always the first targets. Lorenzo held Isabella a little tighter and promised himself, and whatever forces might be listening, that he'd keep her safe, no matter what it cost. Winter came to New York with the kind of cold that made even hardened criminals reconsider their life choices. Lorenzo watched snow fall over Central Park from his study window, Phone pressed to his ear while Dante ran through the weekly numbers. Revenue's up 12% from last quarter, Dante was saying. The legitimate businesses are performing better than projected, and we've only had 2 incidents that required intervention all month. What kind of intervention? Minor stuff. Dispute over territory in Queens resolved with a conversation. And someone tried to shake down one of our restaurants, but Marco handled it without anyone getting hurt. Lorenzo made a note. Good. What about the families? Any rumblings? Chen's happy. His cousin's been running that Brooklyn restaurant for 3 months now, turned it profitable. The Irish are quiet. Markov's keeping his word, staying in his lane. Even the Colombians reached out asking if we wanted to partner on a new shipping route. Legitimate shipping. Mostly. Some gray area, but nothing that'll bring heat. Lorenzo considered it. 6 months ago, he would have jumped at the opportunity without questioning the details. Now he found himself wondering if the profit margin was worth the risk. Send me the proposal. I'll look it over. You're actually going to consider turning down money? I'm going to make sure the money's worth what it costs. There's a difference. After hanging up, Lorenzo sat for a while in the quiet study. His empire was running smoother than it had in years, despite, or maybe because of, his new approach. Fewer bodies, fewer federal investigations, fewer wars with rival organizations. Turned out when you stopped treating every problem like a nail, you didn't need a hammer as often. Isabella appeared in the doorway, bundled in one of his sweatshirts that was 3 sizes too big on her. You've been in here for 4 hours, she said. Has it been that long? It has. Come take a break. I made hot chocolate. Lorenzo followed her to the kitchen, where 2 mugs sat steaming on the counter. Real hot chocolate, the kind she made from scratch with actual cocoa and milk, not the powdered garbage he'd been drinking his whole life. They sat at the island together, shoulders touching. I have something to tell you, Isabella said. Lorenzo's stomach tightened. Those 6 words never led anywhere good. What is it? Don't look so worried. It's good news. At least I think it's good news. She took a breath. The hospital offered me a position, head of pediatric nursing for their new clinic initiative. They're opening 5 free clinics across the city for underserved communities, and they want me to oversee the medical staff. Isabella, that's incredible. It is. But it's also a big job. More responsibility, longer hours, higher profile. And I wanted to make sure you're okay with it before I accept. Why wouldn't I be okay with it? Because higher profile means more visibility. More people knowing who I am and what I do. More risk, potentially. Lorenzo understood what she was really asking. Could he handle her stepping further into the public eye? Could he let her take the job without trying to control every aspect of how she did it? Take the job, he said. You're sure? I'm sure. This is what you've been working toward your whole career. I'm not going to stand in the way of that. Isabella kissed him. Thank you. That means a lot. When do you start? Next month. They want me to help design the clinics, hire the staff, set up the protocols. It's going to be intense for a while. Then we'll figure it out, together. Over the next few weeks, Lorenzo watched Isabella throw herself into the new position with the same fierce dedication she brought to everything. She worked late nights developing training programs, spent weekends touring potential clinic locations, came home exhausted but energized in ways he'd never seen. And he kept his promise. He didn't interfere, didn't try to control, didn't let his fear dictate her choices. It was harder than anything he'd done in his criminal career, but he managed it. The first clinic opened in the South Bronx in early January. Lorenzo attended the ribbon-cutting ceremony, standing in the back while Isabella gave a speech about accessible healthcare and community support. She was radiant, confident, completely in her element. Dante stood beside him. She's good at this. She's good at everything. You thinking about going legitimate, following her lead? Lorenzo had been thinking about it, actually. Not completely. He wasn't naive enough to think he could just walk away from 30 years of criminal enterprise without consequences. But maybe there was a middle path. Maybe he could shift more resources into legitimate businesses, phase out the operations that required violence, build something that wouldn't eventually destroy him. Maybe, he said, still figuring it out. After the ceremony, Isabella introduced Lorenzo to the hospital administrators, the city council members who'd supported the project, the community leaders who'd fought for funding. She introduced him as her partner, and nobody questioned what that meant. Nobody seemed to know or care about his other life. It felt strange, being in a room where he was just Lorenzo, not the boss, not the king, not the man everyone feared. Just Isabella's boyfriend who smiled politely and made small talk about healthcare policy. He kind of liked it. That evening, back at the apartment, Isabella collapsed on the couch beside him. "That went well," she said. "It did. You were amazing." "I was nervous. Public speaking isn't really my thing. Could have fooled me. You looked like you'd been doing it for years." Isabella smiled and laid her head on his shoulder. "I'm glad you were there." "Where else would I be?" "I don't know. Running your empire, intimidating people, doing mysterious mob boss things. I do most of that before lunch now. Afternoons are reserved for you." She laughed. "Is that so?" "Absolutely. It's in my schedule. 3 p.m. to midnight belong to Isabella." "What happens at midnight?" "That's when you usually fall asleep and I go back to work for a few hours." "You need to sleep more." "I sleep enough." 4 hours a night isn't enough, Lorenzo. "It's what I've always done." Isabella sat up and looked at him. "You know what I think? I think you're afraid to sleep because that's when you can't control things. When your guard is down and the ghosts catch up." She wasn't wrong. Lorenzo had spent decades outrunning his past, staying busy enough that he didn't have to think about the choices he'd made or the person he'd become. "Maybe," he admitted. "Talk to me about it. About what keeps you up." Lorenzo was quiet for a long time. This was the part of himself he never showed anyone. The doubts, the regrets, the weight of all those bodies. "I think about the people I've hurt," he finally said. "The ones who deserved it and the ones who didn't. I think about whether any of it mattered, whether I built something worth the cost, and I wonder if I'm too far gone to ever be anything else." "You're not too far gone." "How do you know?" "Because you're here, because you chose to change, because every day you're trying to be better than you were yesterday." "That's not too far gone. That's someone fighting their way back." Lorenzo pulled her close. "What did I do to deserve you?" "You sat with dying children when you didn't have to. You tried to save me when it would have been easier to walk away. You're not perfect, Lorenzo, but you're trying. That's what matters." They sat there in comfortable silence until Isabella spoke again. "I want to do something," she said. "Something big." "What kind of big?" "I want to start a foundation for kids who can't afford medical care. Fully funded, no questions asked. If a child needs treatment, they get it, regardless of insurance or immigration status or anything else." "That's going to cost millions." "I know, which is why I'm asking if you'd be willing to fund it." Lorenzo pulled back to look at her. "You want to use my money I made through criminal enterprise, to fund a children's medical foundation?" "Yes. I want to take something built on darkness and turn it into light. I want those resources to do good instead of harm. Is that crazy?" It was crazy. It was also the most Isabella thing he'd ever heard. "How much are we talking?" he asked. "To start? Maybe 10 million, then another 5 million a year for operations." Lorenzo thought about his accounts, his assets, the money sitting in offshore banks earning interest while he figured out what to do with it. He'd been looking for ways to go more legitimate anyway. "Okay," he said. Isabella blinked. "Okay? Just like that?" "Just like that. On one condition." "What condition?" "You let me be involved, not running it, that's your thing, but I want to help. Site selection, security, whatever you need. I want to be part of building something good." Isabella's eyes were shining. "Really? Really? I've spent 30 years building an empire on fear. Maybe it's time to build something on hope instead." She kissed him, hard and desperate and full of love. "We're going to change so many lives. You already have. You changed mine." Over the next 3 months, they worked together to build the foundation from the ground up. Isabella handled the medical side. Protocols, staffing, equipment. Lorenzo handled everything else: real estate, legal structure, security, funding streams that couldn't be traced back to criminal enterprise. They named it the Light Foundation, which made Lorenzo roll his eyes but also felt oddly appropriate. The first center opened in Brooklyn in April, a converted warehouse that Isabella had transformed into a state-of-the-art pediatric facility. Free care for any child who walked through the doors, no questions asked. Lorenzo stood in the lobby on opening day. watching families stream in. A mother with 3 kids who couldn't afford their asthma medications. A father whose daughter needed surgery his insurance wouldn't cover. Teenagers who'd been skipping doctor visits because the copays were too high. Isabella was everywhere at once, greeting families, directing staff, solving problems as they arose. She was exhausted and stressed and completely in her element. Dante found Lorenzo watching from the sidelines. "This is wild," Dante said. "You know, half the families coming through here are from neighborhoods we used to run protection rackets in?" "I know. Doesn't that feel weird?" "Yeah, but maybe that's the point. Maybe this is how we pay back some of what we took." Dante was quiet for a moment. "The families are asking questions about where all this money's going, why you're putting resources into legitimate ventures instead of expansion. What are you telling them? That you're diversifying, building long-term stability instead of short-term profits. Most of them buy it, but some think you've gone soft." Lorenzo turned to look at him. "What do you think?" "I think you found something worth being soft for. And honestly, I think you're happier than I've ever seen you. So maybe soft isn't the worst thing. High praise from you. Don't let it go to your head." That night, Lorenzo and Isabella celebrated with takeout Chinese food in the empty foundation lobby after all the families had gone home. "We did it," Isabella said, sitting cross-legged on the floor. "We actually did it." "You did it. I just wrote the checks." "You did way more than that. This place exists because you believed in it, because you chose to build something instead of destroy something." Lorenzo sat beside her. "I've been thinking about the future, about what comes next." "What comes next?" "More centers, for one. If this one works, we should open them in every borough. Maybe expand beyond New York eventually." "That's good thinking. What else?" "Legitimizing more of my operations. The restaurants, the real estate, even some of the shipping if we can clean it up. I'm not saying I can walk away from everything overnight, but maybe over time I can shift the balance. Less criminal enterprise, more legitimate business." Isabella set down her food. "You're serious." "I'm serious. I don't know if I can ever completely leave this life. Too many people depend on me, too many alliances that would collapse. But I can change how I operate, make different choices, build something that won't eventually put you in danger or land me in prison." "What changed? Why now?" Lorenzo looked at her. This woman who'd somehow seen past everything he was and loved him anyway, who'd challenged him to be better, who'd shown him what life could look like outside the shadows. "You did," he said simply. "You made me want to deserve you, and I can't do that if I keep being the person I've always been." Isabella crawled over and kissed him. "I love you exactly as you are, but I love that you want to grow too. I love you, not just for what you've done for me, but for who you are. You're the best person I've ever known, Isabella Cruz." "I'm really not. I'm stubborn and judgmental, and I hold grudges." "You're a nurse who volunteers at free clinics and started a foundation for sick kids. You're basically a saint." "Saints don't fall in love with mob bosses." "Lucky for me, you're not actually a saint then." They made love right there on the lobby floor of the foundation, surrounded by medical equipment and children's drawings, 2 imperfect people building something beautiful from broken pieces. The months that followed weren't easy. Lorenzo had to navigate the delicate process of transitioning away from his more violent operations without appearing weak. Some of the families pushed back, tested his boundaries, tried to take advantage of his perceived softness. He pushed back harder. The difference was how he pushed back. Fewer bodies, more economic pressure. Instead of killing rivals, he outmaneuvered them financially. Instead of burning warehouses, he bought them out from under competitors. He still played the game, just with different rules. And it worked. By summer, Lorenzo's legitimate businesses were outperforming his criminal ones. The foundation had opened 2 more centers and was planning 3 additional locations. Isabella's hospital work was getting national attention, articles in medical journals, speaking invitations at conferences. They moved into a new apartment together, something they chose jointly instead of Lorenzo's old penthouse. Smaller, warmer, more like a home than a fortress. One evening in late August, Lorenzo came home to find Isabella on the balcony, staring at the sunset over the Hudson. "You okay?" he asked, sliding an arm around her waist. "I've been thinking about something," she said. "What's that?" "How different our lives are now compared to 8 months ago. How much has changed." "Good different or bad different?" "Good." Definitely good, but also kind of terrifying. She turned to look at him. Do you ever worry it won't last? That something will happen and we'll lose all of this? Lorenzo had worried about exactly that every single day. Yeah, but I try not to let the fear stop me from living. That's very wise. I learned it from this nurse I know. She's pretty smart. Isabella smiled. She sounds wonderful. She is. Pain in my ass sometimes, but wonderful. Only sometimes? Okay, frequently. But I like it. They stood there watching the sun disappear behind the city skyline, the lights starting to flicker on across millions of windows. All those lives, all those stories, all those people trying to figure out how to be happy. I have something for you, Lorenzo said. He pulled a small box from his pocket. Isabella's eyes went wide. Lorenzo, it's not what you think. I mean, it's a ring, but not that kind of ring. Not yet, anyway. I wanted to ask properly, in a better place, with a speech and everything. But I've been carrying this around for 2 weeks, and I can't wait anymore. He opened the box. A simple gold band with a small diamond, elegant and understated. I'm not asking you to marry me right now, Lorenzo said. I know we still have things to work through, and I'm not sure I'll ever be completely out of the life I've lived. But I'm asking you to consider it, to think about a future where we do this permanently, where we build something together that lasts. Isabella was crying. You're asking me to think about maybe marrying you someday? I know it's not romantic. I know I should wait for the perfect moment. But with you, every moment feels right. So I'm asking now in our home on a random Tuesday because I don't want to wait for perfect. I just want you. Isabella took the box, looking at the ring. This is the least smooth proposal attempt I've ever heard of. I'm out of practice. Give me a break. Lorenzo Vieri, are you asking me to think about possibly considering eventually marrying you at some undefined point in the future? Yes. Is that a yes? It's a definitely yes. To all of it. The thinking, the considering, the undefined future. All of it. Lorenzo slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, which felt like a sign. They kissed as the last light faded from the sky. Two people who'd found each other in the darkness and chosen to walk toward the light together. The foundation kept growing. By the end of the year, they had 6 centers operating across 3 states, with plans for more. Lorenzo gradually shifted more of his empire toward legitimate operations, maintaining just enough of the old structure to keep the family satisfied while building something new. It wasn't perfect. There were still threats, still complications, still moments when Lorenzo had to make choices he wasn't proud of. But there were fewer of them now, and when they came, he handled them differently. One December evening, Lorenzo found himself back at the same hospital where Isabella had saved his nephew's life over a year ago. But this time he wasn't visiting a patient. He was here for the Foundation's holiday party, an event Isabella had organized for the families they'd helped throughout the year. The pediatric wing was decorated with lights and garlands. Kids ran through the hallways with hot chocolate and cookies. Parents who'd been terrified about affording their children's medical care now laughed and talked about their kids getting better. Lorenzo stood in the corner watching Isabella move through the crowd. She stopped to hug a mother whose daughter had needed heart surgery, kneeled down to talk to a kid who'd been in a wheelchair but was now walking with crutches, made everyone feel seen, valued, important. Dante appeared beside him. You know what's crazy? What? A year ago, if someone told me Lorenzo Vieri would be hosting a children's Christmas party in a hospital, I would have had them committed. But here we are. Here we are. You happy, boss? Lorenzo thought about it. Happiness had never been a goal, never even felt possible. But standing here watching Isabella bring joy to people who desperately needed it, knowing he'd helped make it happen, yeah, he was happy. I am, he said. For the first time in my life, I actually am. Good. You deserve it. After the party wound down, Lorenzo and Isabella walked through the quiet hospital halls. They passed the ICU where she'd fought for her life after the shooting, the room where his nephew had recovered. All these spaces where their stories had intersected and changed both of them. Thank you, Isabella said. For what? For tonight. For the Foundation. For trying to be better. For loving me. I'm the one who should be thanking you. You saw something in me worth saving when I'd stopped believing there was anything left. Isabella stopped walking and turned to face him. You saved yourself, Lorenzo. I just reminded you it was possible. We saved each other then. Yeah, I think we did. They kissed in the empty hallway, surrounded by the beeping of monitors and the soft footsteps of nurses on night shift. It wasn't romantic in the traditional sense. No sunset, no music, no perfect moment. But it was real. And for two people who'd spent so long pretending to be things they weren't, real was better than perfect. 6 months later, Lorenzo officially proposed. Not with a big production or public spectacle, but in the lobby of the First Light Foundation Center, surrounded by pictures of all the children they'd helped. Isabella said yes before he'd finished asking. They got married in a small ceremony in Central Park that summer. Just close friends, some family, a handful of people from both their worlds who'd supported them through everything. Dante was Lorenzo's best man. Dr. Chen stood beside Isabella. The family sent gifts but didn't attend, which was exactly how Lorenzo wanted it. This day was about starting something new, not honoring what came before. As Lorenzo watched Isabella walk toward him through the trees, wearing a simple white dress and carrying wildflowers, he thought about the journey that had brought them here, the shooting that almost killed her, the war that could have destroyed them both, all the choices and compromises and impossible moments where they'd had to decide whether love was worth the cost. It had been worth it, every single moment. Isabella reached him and took his hands. You ready for this? She whispered. I've been ready since the moment you pushed back my money and told me to make sure my nephew wore his seatbelt. That was over 2 years ago. I know, I'm a slow learner. She laughed, and they turned to face the officiant. The ceremony was short, simple, perfect. When it was over and they were officially married, Lorenzo kissed his wife for the first time and felt something settle in his chest. Peace, maybe. Or just the absence of the constant fear that had defined his existence for so long. At the reception, Dante pulled Lorenzo aside. I have to tell you something, Dante said. What is it? The families want to meet, all of them. They're calling it a summit. Lorenzo felt the old tension creeping back. About what? About you. About the changes you've made, the new direction. Some of them are supportive. Others think you're setting a dangerous precedent. When? Next week. You don't have to go if you don't want to, but it might be good to address this directly. Lorenzo looked across the reception at Isabella, dancing with her mother, completely radiant. Set it up, he said, but make it clear, I'm not going back to the old ways. They can accept the new direction or they can find someone else to work with. That's a risky stance. I don't care anymore, Dante. I spent 30 years being who they wanted me to be. Now I'm going to be who I actually am. If that costs me everything, at least I'll lose it being honest. Dante smiled. She really did change everything, didn't she? Everything. The summit happened the following Tuesday in the same private club where Lorenzo and Markov had made their peace. Representatives from all the major families gathered around the table. Italians, Irish, Russians, Chinese, Colombians, everyone with a stake in New York's underworld. Vincent DeMarco called the meeting to order. We're here to discuss Lorenzo Vieri's recent operational changes and what they mean for our collective business interests. An older Italian named Carmine spoke first. You've gone soft, Lorenzo. Everyone sees it. The mercy you show, the legitimate businesses, this foundation for children, it makes us all look weak. It makes you look smart, Lorenzo countered. The old ways are dying. Federal scrutiny is increasing. Public tolerance is decreasing. And the next generation doesn't want what we built. So we can either adapt or we can go extinct. Adapt how? The Irish representative asked. By finding ways to operate that don't bring constant heat. By building legitimate fronts that actually make money instead of just laundering it. By choosing our battles instead of fighting every challenge to our authority. That's not how this business works, Carmine insisted. Then maybe it's time to change how the business works. The room erupted in argument. Some agreed with Lorenzo, seeing the wisdom in evolution. Others called it betrayal, weakness, the beginning of the end. Markov, surprisingly, spoke up in Lorenzo's defense. 6 months ago, I wanted him dead, the Russian said. He'd cost me millions, made me look bad, threatened everything I'd built. But instead of going to war, he found another way. He made my problems disappear, and in return I backed off. You know what happened? Both our operations got stronger. So maybe there's something to this new approach. Li, the Chinese representative, nodded. Our people have less conflict with Vieri's organization now than ever before. That benefits everyone. The debate raged for 2 hours. Finally, Vincent DeMarco called for a vote. All in favor of allowing Lorenzo Vieri to continue his operational changes without interference? 7 hands went up. Opposed? 4 hands. Vincent nodded. Motion carries. Lorenzo, you have our conditional support. Keep doing what you're doing, but understand, if your new methods create instability, we'll revisit this arrangement. Understood, Lorenzo said. After the meeting, as people filed out, Carmine pulled Lorenzo aside. I voted against you, the old Italian said. Not because I think you're wrong, but because I'm too old to change. Men like me, we're dinosaurs. But you? You might actually survive what's coming. What is coming? The end of our world as we know it. The feds are getting smarter, the public's losing patience, and the next generation has options we never had. So you do what you need to do, Lorenzo. Build something that lasts. Because what we built, it's already dying. Lorenzo went home that night and told Isabella everything. So you have permission to keep being yourself? She asked. Conditional permission, but yeah. How does that feel? Strange. Like I've spent my whole life playing a role and someone just told me I could stop. Isabella curled up beside him on the couch. You know what I think? I think you've always been this person. You just convinced yourself you had to be someone else to survive. But the Lorenzo who sits with dying children and builds medical foundations, that's who you really are. The rest was just armor. Heavy armor. The heaviest. But you don't need it anymore. You have me now. Is that how this works? You're my armor? We're each other's armor, and also each other's soft place to fall. We're both. Lorenzo pulled her closer. I love you. I love you too, even when you're being difficult. I'm not difficult. You're incredibly difficult, but you're worth it. They sat there in comfortable silence, the city spreading out below them through the windows. Millions of lives, millions of stories, all of them fighting their own battles between who they'd been and who they wanted to become. Lorenzo thought about his own journey, from a desperate kid in Brooklyn to a feared crime boss to a man trying to build something good. It hadn't been clean or easy or anything like redemption, but it had been real. And maybe that was enough. Because here's what Lorenzo had learned in the past 2 years. People aren't born monsters. They become monsters through choices, through circumstances, through the slow accumulation of compromises that distance them from their humanity. But that process could run in reverse too. Through different choices, different circumstances, different people who reminded you what humanity looked like. Isabella had been that reminder for him. Not because she was perfect, she wasn't. Not because she'd fixed him, she hadn't. But because she'd seen all his worst parts and chosen to love him anyway, which made him want to deserve that love. That was the real gift she'd given him, not salvation or redemption or any of those grand concepts. Just the simple, terrifying possibility that he could be different. That change was available to anyone brave enough to reach for it. The Light Foundation continued to grow. Within 3 years, they had centers in 12 cities. Isabella became a national advocate for accessible pediatric care, speaking at conferences and advising on policy. Lorenzo gradually transitioned most of his operations to legitimate enterprises, maintaining only the minimum necessary to keep the families satisfied. He never became a good man in the traditional sense. Still had connections to the underworld, still made morally gray decisions, still used his influence in ways that weren't exactly legal. But he became a better man, and sometimes better was more important than good. 5 years after their wedding, Isabella gave birth to a daughter they named Sophia. Lorenzo held her in the hospital room and made the same promise he'd made to himself about Isabella, that he'd protect her, that he'd give her a life free from the shadows he'd lived in, that she'd never have to make the choices he'd made. She looks like you, Isabella said from the bed. Poor kid. I'm serious, she has your eyes. Lorenzo looked down at the tiny human in his arms, marveling at how something so small could matter so much. I'm going to mess this up, aren't I? Probably. All parents do. But you'll also get some things right, and you'll love her fiercely. That's what matters. I don't know how to be a father. None of us know how to be parents until we are. We just figure it out as we go. What if I pass on the wrong things? What if she learns my worst qualities instead of my best ones? Isabella smiled. Then we'll teach her how to grow past them, like you did. Because that's what you're going to show her, Lorenzo, that people can change, that mistakes don't define us, that love is stronger than legacy. He kissed Isabella's forehead, then his daughter's. When did you get so wise? Around the time I fell in love with a mobster and decided that was a good life choice. Questionable decision-making on your part. The best questionable decision I ever made. Lorenzo looked down at Sophia again, thinking about the future, about the world he'd helped build for her. One with more light than darkness, more hope than fear. It wouldn't be perfect, nothing ever was, but it would be better than what came before. And sometimes better was everything. Years later, Lorenzo would sit in the lobby of the Light Foundation's flagship center and watch his daughter play with other children whose lives had been saved by the organization her parents built. He'd think about the long, strange journey from desperate kid to crime boss to something else entirely, something he still didn't have a perfect word for. Not redeemed, not reformed, just changed by love, by choice, by the impossible gift of someone seeing past your worst self and believing in your best. Isabella would find him there sometimes, lost in thought. "What you thinking about?" she'd ask. How different things could have been. Better or worse. Just different. If you died that night, if I'd chosen war over peace, if I'd stayed who I was instead of trying to be better. But you didn't. You chose differently. That's what matters. And she was right. The choices mattered more than the regrets. The future mattered more than the past. Love mattered more than fear. Lorenzo had spent 30 years learning how to survive in darkness, but Isabella had taught him something more important: how to live in the light, not perfectly, not without stumbles or setbacks or moments when the old instincts threatened to take over, but genuinely, honestly, hopefully, because that's what love does. It doesn't erase who you've been or absolve you of what you've done. It just offers the possibility of becoming someone different, someone better, someone worth loving in return. And if you're brave enough to reach for that possibility, if you're willing to do the work of changing, if you can find someone who sees past your armor to the person underneath, well, that's not redemption exactly, but it's close enough.